Ça va. Before we begin, let's get a big shout out to the fucking brainlet witnessed here on my screen. Both of them, to be specific. Uh, this one, and also shout outs to Pedantic Romantic, who finally has seen a sample, a taste of the bullshit we've all been dealing with. If you don't know me, hi, I'm Carl. Single player Carl, Mr. Random. For now, demonstrates so on Twitch. And for today's video, I'm going to be your guide on the wacky and wild world of artist harassment on social media platforms, mainly Twitter and also YouTube. Hi, yes, hello, benvenido. I'm editing Carl. You're gonna see me splicing myself in here every now and again to either give additional context when trying to explain something that gets further on in the video. You're also gonna see me redacting some information and re-explaining it when it comes up so that I can better help you understand the reason why I'm on screen rather than drunk Carl. And I'm also going to be redacting some information from what was shared here, since I am going to need to protect the identities of people involved who were the ones who came forward to explain some things that happened concerning one of ours, a person who was one of my mutuals that was involved with said artist harassment. I'm going to be protecting the identities of the people involved with that I interviewed, and also making sure that the information does not go out poorly. So, just a note, just a tad touch. Trying to make the video a little bit much more consistent, and also make it much more shorter than it has to be, because there are some times where I have to stop, do a call, something. Just letting you know. Continue with your business. It is because today we find ourselves here because I have been witnessing the same misinformation, the same half truths, the same lies, and just generally the same inability to understand or refusal to accept and understand what exactly causes us, me, we, artists, enjoyers of art, and, anime supervillains, from being able to help and support the artists who help us with our projects, or create art for us, or create art themselves for people to enjoy, only to be constantly mocked and maligned and slandered and attacked because there are people out there who dislike their art enough that they will point a finger at every single person, not just themselves and people who follow them, like in this case, someone who's coming at me because they can't win an argument with one of my followers and decide that the thing they're going to do is they're going to tag me and tell me about how I'm supposedly shitty because, and I quote, and this is the fun part, is because they think that I specifically am irrelevant because I am one of the many people who don't accept and constantly mock and point out and label harassment as what it is. Now, I wouldn't have imagined having to make it this particular video this specific way, but I've been waiting to make this content for a little long of a bit. I was supposed to have made this last year as like a reply to a Devos video. So shoutouts to you, Shortfoot Otaku. And also, I was waiting on a particular set of interviews with other victims of this outrage mob that go around harassing people concerning art and concerning anime profiles, as it were. Unfortunately, I don't know if I'll be able to interview them in time, if at all, because it's been difficult to get in touch with them. But I'll continue doing as best as I can. And let's just jump right into it, shall we? Because, see, since Pedantic Romantic now knows what it feels like to feel the sting of what they constantly malign and point out to everybody themselves, but they don't have the backbone to sit down and make a video dissenting against it and displaying why these people are insane and shouldn't be fucking listened to. Since they're not gonna have a backbone, I'm gonna have to be the adult and do a forum. Well, let's jump right into it, shall we? So, where do we begin? The only way I can begin to describe this problem, is to start all the way at the beginning. Right? So, I'm going to start from where I witnessed this behavior. The art harassment started last year, early last year, around January or so. When people started attacking artists and attacking art in general, both single artists from individual people and artists with companies, with comic book companies, or with anime, or with manga, because they didn't like something that was in the edit of a person's drawing. They didn't like the art itself from someone like Sakimi, or from someone like Aki Spark, or from someone like J Lullaby, or The Other Half, or Blue Breed, or any other 18 plus not safe for work artist. They didn't like it. So, rather than have backbones and just say, I don't like it, and it can still exist because I have sense, common sense, people like this would go on to do what would eventually become the most annoying and most recognizable example of this abuse on the platform, which started out as art editing. How art editing started out was it went something like this. You have an art that is made by someone. They make an art as fan work, so appreciating something like a meme, or appreciating something that is recognizable as basically an iconic thing, a fad, a meme, whatever you want to call it. The person gets woke scolded about this, and the person, in all of their upset agitation, will basically have themselves a miniature or mega bitch fit. They'll see an art, they'll hate it so much that they choose to change the original art of the person and to tell them that they fixed it, that they corrected it. The implication being that a person that made the art, as plenty of people here go on to try to discuss, that people don't want people to change the art because it is basically not only shitting on the artist, but it's also taking their work and editing it and changing the meaning behind it to make it into something that it is not. Now, this would go on to be a very serious problem of much debate, because some people said it was stealing, like this conversation did. There were some people who said that it was disrespectful. There were some people who said that there were cases where the art made by a person, especially if it was a political cartoon, made by a controversial individual, like Stone Toss, for example, or something drawn by other political cartoonists outside the sphere of people like ourselves, like Ben Garrison, or political cartoonists for publications like the Daily Mail, or the Guardian, or the New York Times, or the Washington Examiner, or places like that, or Huffington Post, or any of the Waypoint kinds of sites like Kotaku, or Destructoid, or Lock Paper Shotgun, or Polygon, those places. There would be cases where this information and this discussion would go either productively or not productively, like this, but the simple backbone behind it became clear the more you started to see it. An artist would make art, a fan art, or a creation, about a character. Take, for example, one of our best cases of study, Nessa. Nessa is one of the many characters that this happened about. Their entire fiasco is a whole entire thing, and we'll get into it But for now, at this point in time, around about January and February, before Nessa really entered in the picture, the way that it went was artist makes character. Character is something of a passing case of skin. So, the character gets art. The art gets made. People see the art. Some weird person out there in the world says, "You can't make a character who's black skinned light skinned," and starts crying racism. They approach the artist who made the art and they say, "I fixed it for you, honey. Now it's less problematic." The artist tells them, "You can't do that. It's prohibited. You're trying to change my illustration and re-upload it, and it's essentially taking credit away from my work." Person says to artist, "Actually, I can do this because you're being bigoted. Because I'm critiquing you, and I'm not profiteering, I'm just putting you in your place." This dumbass behavior would become the greatest part of what would lead me to create a hashtag to document this behavior. However, we're not quite there yet. We're going to jump around in time as I go through the examples that I'm talking about here. But right now, in the beginning of the year, it's not as bad as it would soon become. So, this behavior, this mindset, would lead to woke scolding individuals deciding to tell people like me, people like you, that art of characters that have too much skin is depictions of a company being on that bullshit. One of the many notable quotes. And one of the other many notable quotes of people, especially when it came to products promoted by companies like Nintendo, especially Nintendo. People saying things like what's on the screen here. "Nessa's outfit was kind of, so I fixed it. Hire me, Nintendo." This behavior of taking the original art and editing it, because rather than just make their own fan edit, some argue that this is just them making their own edit for the memes and whatnot. But this practice of censoring the art by trying to make it woke, by trying to cover up characters that canonically in the original work, as presented by a company or presented by an artist who would then become famed for that work, became known as art fixing or art editing. The majority of the people who do this are the Tumblr rejects that have fled from Tumblr after their website went down, because there were so many websites and so many accounts and so many subgroups posting illicit material, including that of child porn and ERP material, as well as other map and no map accounts that eventually the original owner would go on to make the prolifically well-known and well-timed and well-documented case of removing all pornographic content from the website as an immediate ban hammer, because they didn't know how to handle it. And in the fallout with this behavior, they came here. And so, when the Tumblr rejects came here, the art harassment really started to pick up more than it usually did. We had the same kind of woke scolding, no matter what art, or what art sector, I guess you could say, was doing it. Didn't matter if it was manga, didn't matter if it was anime, didn't matter if it was comic books, didn't matter if it was indie comic books, didn't matter if it was just internet webtoons. The woke scolding began before they started coming here. But after they got here, it became worse, because they started being bold enough to go in the face of other people and take the art and use it as a cudgel to justify their worldviews. And they wouldn't listen, still don't listen. They wouldn't listen, and they would not refuse, or they wouldn't choose to apologize for their behavior. They would double down, and it became known as a cognizant rampant problem. This took us to the point where, for the entirety of January and February, and leading into March before we got to the Nessa situation, that we would see constant, never-ending people posting posts like this, saying, I love this trend of fixing misogynistic memes via good art quality. It's good gay art, everyone. Posts like this would go on to get a lot of coverage. Now, something to mention here, something to really mention here, is that while I personally find the people who are posting this art to be annoying and detestable to the point of deserving contempt, them making art like this was the better way for them to go about it. Because some of the pictures seen, they are recognizable as like common shit posts and memes. But rather than attack an artist for making their art, because since I am reporting this from the future, having the ability of both hindsight and also maturity and growth, I can recognize that between something like this and something like this, excuse me, another one. Between case examples of a post like this compared to a post like this, I infinitely prefer this kind of discussion. Me, myself, personally, I cannot tell them what they can do. I can't tell them what they can and can't make. But what I can do is I can say I appreciate the attempt that was made to be better. This right here is better. This is dog shit. This is toxic behavior. This creates nothing but arguments and violence. Physical, emotional, stress-based, verbal, or otherwise. This is nothing but fucking kicking the horse. This is at least putting out positivity by making something to go against it. The entire intention behind it is that, oh, we're making it, thus this is better because what we had before was so bad. It wasn't. Our art is art. You can like art or you can not like art, but you can't stop it from existing. You can't stop that person from voicing it. You dislike it, but you can't stop it from being voiced. This art would eventually go on to be better case examples of things, because people would take their time to appreciate this. And it was this that then led to them having confused messages. They would say that they want to be fixers, that they want to have more, want to have more positive conversations. But the positivity is not coming from a place that's intellectually honest. They're being intellectually dishonest. They are labeling every person who is against them because of the behavior they were already showing to be misogynistic in origin, rather than us just saying, you're fucking annoying and you're pissing us off and we want you to leave us alone. This would then progress to the point where we started seeing this behavior happen on other websites. Now, this is an example from current year, not exactly from the early of 2019, but this behavior is seen with plenty of art back then as well, where not just on Twitter, but also on places like Reset Era, and also, obviously, on Reddit, you would see this exact same kind of mentality and behavior happening, where you would see people on, say, the Fire Emblem Reddit, deciding to take the art of both male and female, specifically female, because of course it was the female one, of specifically female Byleth being edited to be less horny, covering up the leggings, covering up arm skin, giving them gloves, trying to do everything they can to just make it so that you can't sexualize the art. And while we're there, let's talk about that, shall we? For the people who say that you can't sexualize the art because there's nothing to make horny, you don't seem to understand that the majority of people who you're woke scolding, the people who you're saying that, now since I've made it, since I fixed your art, now people can't pop a boner. Bitch, you don't seem to understand I have an overactive imagination. I can make anything horny. Like even this right here. This bi life. And the male bi life too. I don't fucking care. I take all comers. I appreciate gender equality. I can make anything sexual. I can make anything overt. I can make anything lewd. Because I have a brain. And with that brain, I have an imagination. And if I want to find a way to make something horny, you best believe, even if the character is fully covered up in a fucking dashiki, as we've already seen with case examples with animations made by people like, with people like Shad. Shad can take a Christian nun and a Sunni Shiite Muslim character. Egyptian, I'm not sure exactly what it is, but what that character's specific religion would be in his comic that I'm referencing. You can have Shadbase making art that quite literally is the most risque of the riskiest, of something that should be not sexualized at all. And even earlier before, with the case examples that we can see here, with the art of just the trad wife. Not that one, this one. Like where we can see with the art of, say, the trad wife and the doomer goth girl. Even here with the trad girl and the counterculture doomer girl. I'm not sure what you call this. I don't remember the name of this particular Ojack. But even here, between these two characters, even though these could be considered to be not as sexualized as these two versions here, regardless of whatever content it is in question, I can find something attractive about that. And an artist, much like the one on screen, support them if you're not familiar with them. But with this case here, with his art on screen, I can still sexualize something. I can still find something attractive about it, no matter how ugly you think you've made it, or how ugly you think it was originally. A perfect example of this is the New Guy meme. A character drawn by someone, Uchiids, the Manix Pixie Nightmare Girl, changed their identity so that they could be able to go on harassing people after being well known as a toxic individual in the art community as a whole. Even with the case of New Guy, and also Blondie, another character in their comics. In that art, the character was used as a straw man. Both of them were used as straw men, made to look as if they were something that was more toxic or vile for not having the opinions and the worldview of the artist. And that was considered to be bad. So people, they recognized this and they pushed back against it. And they made positive art rather than harassing Uchiids. And Uchiids didn't fucking like this. They didn't like the fact that somebody took their positivity and made it good. Or took their negativity and made it positive. So they cried harassment. And many of the defenders cried that it was harassment because of their trans identity, which it had nothing to do with, because it doesn't. It doesn't matter what your identity is to the art that you make. It is a reflection of yourself, and if people critique it and you think that they are attacking you because they are critiquing your art, that's not how that works. Your art is not a reflection of your humanity. Your art is separate from you. You can have your opinions, and you can have your political views put into your art, but when people critique your art, they are not in turn then attacking you with weapons. Calm down, honey. Calm down. But this behavior would be seen, and we would come to recognize and say, okay, if they want to have art like this away from us, and they want to leave us alone with what we have, they can enjoy what they enjoy. We can enjoy what we can enjoy, and never the two shall meet. This would change, however, moving forward in time, because we would get to the point where the art fixing would happen rapidly. This, for example, from about August or so, when it would be fully under swing after the Franz Ferdinand shot happened, and I'll show you that one too, we would get to a point where artists would continue with the art editing, the art fixing, and essentially shaming the official art of other games because they're terrified of breasts. This character artist in question was so terrified of the original art of this character here that they had to change the Rockman slash Mega Man X character design to have no breasts. And also, they decided to add pants. And I quote, by their own words, because I thought it was fun. Now I can get behind wanting to make character edits and add things because you want to see a good design. But what you shouldn't do is attempt to fix the official art of a game that you don't even play. And in this case, and in many of these cases, they're trying to fix art of games that they don't even play. So, it would go on to be the toxic relationship that many people would recognize as bad. We would see this behavior, and many of us would start to say to ourselves and to each other, we should start looking out for this. They're getting worse. Because now, they stopped doing it about basic things and started coming for our hobby. This would then lead us to the behavior that would then cause me to document it. The hashtag art edit Twitter itself. I created this hashtag as an archiving resource for me to be able to keep up with all of this multiple cases happening. And there were plenty of them. You had case examples like the one that we're going to cover. And you also had case examples of situations such as idols being just passed over, the harassment of singer group idols being harassed by an industry like that of South Korea, J-pop, K-pop. Those people would go on to be harassed and be assaulted sexually or otherwise in their industries. And these same people who are sitting here pounding about art don't even notice it, don't even care. But when it comes to art that's made by people on the internet, oh, they're all over it. Or, case examples, if I can find it here. I'm not sure if it's here. It might take me a bit to look for it. Ah, here we go. You have case examples here, like of the account Manga Materials, which shut down last year around about June, late June, early July, because it was a Japanese artist from the country who was making anatomy studies and how-to tips for artists, and they were being bullied by Tumblr level artists who didn't like that the worldview was being challenged, and they were harassing them nonstop, constantly, over and over and over and over and over again. And this would be behavior that we would start to notice with Eurasian artists. And if we would start to notice this with the Eurasian artists, because with the case of the Eurasian artists in question, they were being harassed not because they did something bad, but because having their own opinion and them posting that opinion without ever targeting it towards a person became seen as a threat upon these Tumblr level individuals who were the ones doing this behavior to others. They would single them out and tell them how problematic they're being. And because they're not familiar either with the English language, or they're not familiar with the English art scene, as it happens on social media, they would continue to be hounded until they either deleted their art of their own self and bent before the mob, or, in the case of Manga Materials, outright deleted their account and deactivated it because, when you commit a sin against the dogma of Tumblrites, they must have your head, because that's how they think. This would lead us to everyone agreeing, as this behavior continued, that this is annoying, and they would start to openly mock it. How can you find it? Hire the Nintendo. More organs. That's not how boobs work, honey. I hate men. This would get summarily mocked wholesale by everyone. The people who were for the diverse art but got tired of hearing this constant whining. People like myself who measured and archived and took note of this and documented it. The people who were known figures at the time who would push back against it and would mock it wholesale as soon as it happened and every time it happened. And people in the industry, both manga and Western and Eastern art, commenting on it and saying, man, this is some wild ass shit. It started becoming recognizable exactly for what it was. It wasn't people trying to have an opinion and trying to express said opinion because they had strong, passionate views on art. It was woke scolders who wanted to make people do what they wanted. Didn't want to listen, didn't want to try to listen. All they understood was, we're going to do it my way, and fuck you, you're problematic. There was no arguing, there was no discussion. The discussion began to break down more and more. It was leading into this event, specifically around a certain period of time, that it would become obvious that the conversation and the sight about it became so untenable that it came to a fever pitch that would eventually lead to an all-out war, you could say. And this eventually did come when one of our notable individual members of said group would become the martyr for this behavior going out of control. And that was Mr. Marvel. Around about the time, myself specifically, when I was covering what happened to artists like Evil Art, and what happened to artists like, well, Marvel. He'd go on to change his @ I believe now he posts under Troy Vader Art. He's a very good artist. You should check his shit out. Corrado Wanpool. It would be around about this time in these postings that he would get into a situation with Ramos in the month of July, late July, right around when I started publicly posting more often. It would be at this time period that this would happen. And the way that this happened was very, very simple, as you can see here. These pictures are not as clear as other ones, but this happened around about May or so. Yes, this happened about around the 12th of May, when the first post about it went up. But here's how this went down. Ramos Isaac, a person who's known for making art, in the month of March, made a self-made Metroid thread of Metroid redesigns. One of the points of note that a lot of people didn't particularly like was that, on top of making art about Samus Aran, Samus, because Ramos made art about Samus, people saw it as a sin, because very clearly this is not what they're used to seeing when they see Samus. This was Ramos's own take, his own idea, not a fix, as some people, especially including myself, as I had said at the time. This was not made in malice, not at all, not even close to what it was done for. At the time when it was witnessed, when this was made, Ramos was just making the art to make the art, and he still does. He still makes the art just to make the art. But when this art was made, and I want you to direct your attention to the comment that's underneath this. The the people who were celebrating and sharing his art around were not of the same mind as Ramos himself. Ramos made the art so that he could have an interesting, inventive, explorative redesign of the Metroid suits because he wanted to do it. He thought it would be fun. Why stop him? He's an artist. He's allowed to art. He's allowed to create. Not stopping him from doing so. I certainly wasn't at the time, and I'm certainly not now. But at the time, for a lot of people, because the outrage was at a fever pitch, when we saw this art, and then we saw comments under this art, like this. I love this. She's so buff and angry and not a high-heeled jiggle-titty sex moppet. I mean, there's a time and place for jiggle-titty sex moppets, just not as Metroid protagonists. We would go on to see one of the many repeated stupid cases of takes made about franchises and art and the original intention of art, as it would become revealed when looking and having these discussions with individuals like Rooney Basilites. And that was for characters like Samus Aran, characters like Lara Croft, characters like Jade of Beyond Good and Evil, characters like, well, honestly, any female protagonist, air quotes or not, that was seen as too sexualized to be a leading female in a long-running franchise like that of Tomb Raider or Metroid or any game series where they appear, because it was seen as wrong, because the art was seen as too sexy. It meant that they were not strong enough or capable enough or at all potentially encouraging or inspiring for everyone to have. The only reason they exist, as Runabasilipides would go on to tell us, is because, oh, they're only liked because they're jiggle-titty sex moppets. They're sex objects. They're not real people. These people don't like real girls. This would lead, as I assume that it did, I haven't fully talked to him about it, if it did, but because I was paying attention at the time, and I'm one of his followers, when I was watching this, I believe this was the sentiment that led Mr. Marvel to make this counter, namely saying, I fixed it for you. You don't need to make her a man to make her tough, intimidating, or battle-worn. Mine has a scar and a shaved head. Yours is a dude. Let me be the first one to say this. Especially since we have the power of going back through time. Now, I'm going to explain something, because I want many people to understand this when they try to go back and say what is and what isn't. I need them to understand that they're getting upset either about the right or the wrong fucking things, because we're going to talk about them. If this is wrong, right? If that is as wrong as is this being wrong, if this is as wrong as this is as wrong, and both of those are as bad, if not worse, than this being wrong, as well as this being wrong, then this, by simple comparison, is wrong. This is wrong. This was wrong of Marvel to do. He shouldn't have done this. This was unacceptable. Because this is no better. This is no different, and this is no better than this or this. Excuse me. This is no better than this or this or this. It was not our place to go to another artist and to commit the very sin that we are discounting. Because this was bad. This was very, very bad. This then leads us to the point. Because this wrong action here, despite how wrong his behavior was, because he did make edits about this, and he did do this not only once, but also technically again, by mocking people to their face and telling them that their butthurt sustained him because he saw the inherent hypocrisy. He has a point, but this was the wrong way to go about voicing that opinion. Because he chose to do this the way that he did, it put us in a situation and put us in an argumentative position where we were not able to say, yes, this is wrong. Because this was bad. This was wrong of us to do. It's the wrong way to go about the conversation about it. We shouldn't have done it like this. It was unacceptable. It continues to be unacceptable. But because we did this, because he did this, it not only legitimized the sense of victimization, but also put us in a position where we would go on to become incapable of really having discussions. Because rather than us being able to talk to each other as groups, tribes, tribalistic behavior, because we would go on being able to discuss to each other what our problems and grievances were, it instead led to us saying, you did this, and then them bringing up Marvel and saying, well, you did this. And it would lead to never-ending circles of arguments and fighting, infighting, victimhood claiming. None of it was good. This would be right around the time, exactly in the time of March, where we would go on to see a new evolution of this bad fucking behavior. In the form of the Nessa content. There are multiple examples, and I'm going to bring up those examples now, because I already talked about it, but we're going to talk about it again, because this would be the point where after the Franz Ferdinand, because not only was this wrong for Marvel to do, but the reaction that the group and the sycophants following Ramos Isaac had was to false flag his account and have him banned. That was also wrong, by the way. If it was wrong for him to be able to go into the artist's face and say this, it was immature and childish of that fan base, not specifically Ramos's fans, although there were many of them there. I know, because I saw them myself. Not only was it wrong of them to do that, and for them to have that reaction, it was wrong of them to then go ahead and turn that around and take that person's opinion and use it as proof of harassment that could then be used to remove them off the platform. Bullshit that happens out in the streets is not a point and a reason to lift a gun of censorship and shoot someone in the goddamn head. Because that's what you're doing when you report an artist for choosing to make art of something that they're passionate about, regardless of whether or not the ethics of them having done it the way they did it are justified or not. You do not get to decide that you are going to be judge, jury, and executioner. You do not lie to the platform and tell them that they have done something that they did not do. Mr. Marvel did not harass someone, other than specifically going about having a discussion and a conversation about art the wrong way. He didn't create child porn. He didn't do any of these things that these people said they did. And this is something that's going to come up when we get through this. We're not quite there yet, but this is something that started to crop up, where people start to harass and censor others by not actually attacking their arguments, but instead censoring them and attempting to censor them using these methods. This would be what comes up with the case of Nessa here, where people tell them that whitewashing of a character who canonically looks black would become an issue. Because there would be people who would lie, and lie loudly, saying that the reason people are changing art characters like Nessa is because they're racists, and that's not. Drawing a character black or white in a lighter tone skin tone or in a lighter skin register does not equal racism. Because the reason the whole situation about Nessa cropped up was because of artists like Whistler X being harassed. Whistler X, Whistler X is one of the many hobby artists from Taiwan. It was one of the many Eurasian artists that were being harassed concerning Nessa. Because when they originally drew Nessa, these artists drew her in their style, right? They drew her with multiple styles. They drew her white, they drew her black, they drew her mixed color, they drew her blacker than black, they drew her with censor art, and they also drew her with mocking posts like this of people who will go out and change their fucking shit, and them expressing their opinion. This would happen all the time. This particular piece was made after what happened to Evil Art, but this particular piece made in June of 18, where what happened with Evil Art happened around the 23rd. They would make these cuts specifically to mock the Tumblrites. Because after Mr. Marvel got banned off Twitter for a while because people were harassing him for political reasons, eventually he would come back and he would change his act and he would go on to do great things, not really concerning himself with this everyday violence. Because these artists were being harassed by these Tumblrites with posts antagonizing them for drawing the character as non-POC. And the artists, because they're from a place where actual racism occurs, I mean, if you just want to see an example of that, look at Devos' latest video about the actual Wuhan numbers. They have there's a commercial in there that displays it, but specifically here, you had them having posts where they would come at the artists and antagonize them for drawing characters as not blacker than black, with all the pride that went with it. And the artists legitimately replying to them with, "What's black?" And these Tumblrites losing their fucking mind. Whistler X, because they're a Eurasian artist and they use sites like Kaburu and Pivx, and they don't have crowdfunding sources that can be taken down by someone being upset and antagonizing them for any reason other than because they have a personal problem and they don't know how to fucking handle themselves. Because they have off-brand, non-American resources for their ability to fund their business or their hobby, they would make art like this to antagonize the shit out of the Tumblrites because they considered them bourgeois, white liberals living in this bubble of privilege afforded to them because they don't understand that they are trying to discuss problems that they do not begin to even comprehend. They're putting it through a lens of problem and privilege rather than putting it through an understanding that the reason these things are happening is because they are constantly trying to harass a group who want to be left the fuck alone. And rather than listening to them when they say, "Leave me alone," they continue to harass them and antagonize them, and they decide, "Okay, since you won't listen to me, I'm just gonna mock you to your face, and I'm gonna get followers while doing it." Which, by the way, is the smartest thing to do. So, they made art of Nessa in the dark skin. They made art of Nessa in the light skin. They made art of Nessa in the Mr. Popo skin, and they also made the censored art of her in this outfit. No matter what position you take, no matter how upset you are, and as I already discussed, no matter what your position on supposed horniness is, whether it's with the amount of skin that she has here, no matter it's the skin color which you take offense with, or it's the fact that they have not enough clothes, clearly, the character still got that ass, though. And as such, especially with a piece like this right here, made specifically antagonizing them by word and by name and by action, these people lost their fucking mind. This would be the point where Evil Art a recognizable person would go on to make a very big statement by calling out these people by their actions. And I made a post about this. I made a whole Twitter moment about this, back when Twitter moments were actually used more prevalently and were displayed on your profile, rather than being something you had to go find. It was because of this outrage that they got so upset from being fucking beaten the fuck out by Eurasian artists that they turned to the Western artists, the ones that they could woke scold and that they could harass, and that we would then learn that Twitter gave no shit whatsoever about the problem of art as a whole. Now they would go on to pick on him specifically because he would make an art piece that would piss them the fuck off because it was made to do that. But he made an art piece. This is the art piece. This right here. He made this not to be racist, by the way. Because if you know anything about evil art, you also know if you know anything about evil art, you know that he's a person who makes bait posts. For example, right here on screen, you can't see it. Let me open up a new link. Right here on screen, you have one of his pieces. This is his Black Panther, right? The point of Black Panther is that if the problem is that you identify with the name of the Black Panther rather than understanding that Black Panther is just a mantle, and if you have no problem with saying that any character and changing white characters to be black characters is acceptable, okay, let's put that logic to the test. Let's put that bitch to the test. And he put it to the test, and they lost their fucking mind. He made this back in February of 2018 when Black Panther was in theaters. And very clearly, you can see the reason why it would piss people of this kind off. Let me be the first one to tell you that this is acceptable. Not only because I have heritage in African culture, and not only are white South Africans a fucking thing, because there are Danish fucking descendants of white Africans that lived in the country, but because the word Black Panther, by the way, is not to be used as well, his name's Black Panther, so you can't make him white. Because if you think that, you obviously don't know shit about Black Panther. Because this is the most Black Panther thing he could fucking have done. And the reason why, as I'll demonstrate here, is because this goes back to an understanding with the idea itself. This is notable from one of Christopher Priest's, the illustrious, the well-known Christopher Priest, good comic book artist, having made a entire thing about it, right? This goes back to the post, or to the panel of Christopher Priest known as One Hot. Specifically, the idea itself expressed here. That the world sees the Panther, but America sees the Black. But he is more than just what they define him as. 5 fingers, 5 toes, 1 heart. The idea being that to honor the idea of what you think you're defending, you have to do more than just put on the image of what you think represents what it is. You can't just put on a garment, you can't just put on an idea, you can't just put on an argument that you think represents you and your position. You need to put on the soul of what it represents. And when he made this art, he was putting to the test exactly the ideology that these people make. Because this would be the point in the art discussion that we begin to realize that these people don't actually have set values. They don't actually have set standards. They don't actually believe the shit they're saying. They're saying it so they can win an ideological argument against people like me, against people like the artists, against the common public, people who are uninformed enough that they don't know these things because they're not people who actually know the hobby. They don't know the medium. They don't know anything about it. And so, because they're stupid individuals who choose to be mad about these things, these specific ones, because rather than listen to people, they're deciding now, since we have the outrage, we're going to be bourgeois, we're going to be woke, we're going to be activists, and we're going to say any person who draws things that we don't like, they're supposedly racists. And so, this would be what birthed my thread. The migrating upset aggregation lists attacking Nessa. Because it's a never-ending cycle at this point. After they got him off the platform, Marvel created them to have an excuse to say, oh, well, we're not going to listen to people anymore. They never were in the first place anyways, but we're not going to listen to people anymore. Now we're just going to attack people if they have something that's racist. This would be when they start making art to explicitly claim that people are racists. Because, of course they did. They saw this bait post by him. They would dog him out. They would harass him. They would antagonize him. They would try to suspend him, and they did succeed in doing so. Only temporarily, however. They would go on to do all these things to try and get him off the platform. But that's not all they did. This would be the point. Certifiably, by every single modicum, by every single measurement and design, where they would go on to do this. Where they would make posts instructing people to report his account, his crowdfunding sources, to be able to try to take his shit down. Because this is how the companies, especially Patreon, which is why I don't use it, and Twitter allow this harassment to exist. They would harass him not just on the website, and harass him not just through these methods, but they would harass him because of their inability to have an argument. Because they have gone past the point of where they're actually going to listen and talk. And they would instruct people to harass him on his platforms, and to harass him on his shit, and not to go out of their way to fucking attempt to remove their money. And if you think that this was like, oh, okay, clearly, Carl, clearly you're telling us that because they went out of their way to instruct people to go on a harassment campaign, that they were punished for this behavior. Well, clearly it was a tit-for-tat situation, so they got punished for it, right? Right? No. No, they didn't. No, they fucking didn't. Didn't happen. Didn't happen at all. In fact, let me show you what fucking happened. Because I was the one who took flack for this. For covering this situation. What happened, rather than what should have happened, what happened was that Evil Art got dogged out by a whole bunch of people who decided to call them racist when they're not. And not only did they come after him, they came after others. They harassed and banned a lot of other artists that were demonstrating these people's inability to actually have the concept and the idea to understand and listen to why they are wrong. Other artists, Japanese artists, that had accounts on the platform started getting suspended because of these individuals getting mad. Because they couldn't target their PivXs and they couldn't target their Gaburos, they would instead target their Twitter accounts to try and censor them. And they would succeed in doing so. Some have cropped back up, some have left the platform entirely because of how untenable it's become. Because, as can be seen here, if it's okay to claim that people are racist, it must be clear that it's actually because they just don't understand. They don't care. And they would do this to multiple people. There was behavior that showed that this was happening to a 10-year-old boy who was being harassed. It happened to artists. There would be people who are arguing that it's acceptable to do things where they argue that the race swapping is acceptable, saying if race swapping Nessa was racist, then so is race swapping Ariel. Specifically, that if changing Nessa from white to black, if it's racist to change Nessa from black to white. It is racist to change Ariel from white to black. This specifically being about the updated Disney remake of Little Mermaid that's going to be made later on in this year. I personally talked to Evil Art after this happened, actually, and I posted that interview in this thread. I'll link it somewhere below if I can be bothered to remember, because my brain is lost on so many of these pieces of alcohol. But this is not the end of what would happen. This is not the end of it. Because when I covered this situation, and I antagonized these people, and I called them out for how shitty they were acting and behaving and being, a group of people would then come to try to get me banned off the platform. And it didn't work out the way they wanted to. But the experience itself allowed me to demonstrate exactly how fucking insane these people are. This, for example, is one of those people. A person who's happy that he'll lose money for being a piece of shit when he did nothing wrong. Me calling them out and telling them that, are you prepared to lose money for being the kind of refuse that acts like a tyrant at the bequest of corporations who don't even care about you, and just care about your money and the mob, and are you prepared to use and be suffered to the same consequences that you use on others by legitimizing the same rod for your back? And this person would go on to try to have a lot of interesting, diverse, fucked up takes. And I said this very clearly when I explained this, that the people who are normalizing the mob, it's not people like myself. It's not people who like the artists. It's not people who enjoy the art. It's the people who have no fucking argument, who can't even begin to discuss it. The ones that keep antagonizing these individuals. But, as predicted, and as I expected, and because I had prepared my evidence for this, because I'm not one to be caught out without evidence, I would be one who would find myself in a situation where these motherfuckers tried very hard to try to get me banned. And this is the part that pisses me off. Because not only did I intentionally see that I eventually took a suspension, you're gonna fucking flip when I tell you about this. Not only did I take a suspension because of these people harassing me, not only did the people from the harassment campaign coming after artists like Evil Art, it was not just this one, there were several, and they are still up. They still exist. Not only did I point out by word, by time, by name, with archives and evidence and immediate fucking rundowns of everything that happened and everything that was said, by the word, by the time, by the date that it happened. Not only did I demonstrate how this behavior was being accepted on the platform, not only did I point it out to Vijaya herself in email, not only did I point it out, not only did I demonstrate it, not only did I show it. So, not only did I give them all of the information that they would need, not only did I do everything that I was supposed to do to allow Twitter as a platform to solve this problem, not only do I go out of my way to make it very clear and make it very explicit and make it very easy for them to be able to understand what was fucking happening and what they needed to do, not only do I do that, but not only do I go out of my way to call it out to them, display it, show it where it is, and give them every single piece of every single thing they would need to be able to suspend the accounts that are calling for this. The ones harassing me and the ones harassing him. They instead attempt to suspend and lock me, where I call out these individuals and their actions because they're upset at me because I already clapped them out before. They would then go on to tell me, as my as my secondary helper would choose to say on my behalf. Not only did they not restore specifically from the appeal at the time until later, after I had to get a hold of not one, not two, but 5 different humans working on my case, not only did they not suspend any of the harassment campaigns against any of the other artists, including Evil Art, or the one happening to myself, they would not remove the individuals from posting said information, attacking his career, specifically to my face. They would take these things, they would take this, they would take these posts and the bot, and then 2 different humans read them and assumed, oh, this person's reporting themselves. Not the people reporting and not the people harassing the artists, but specifically, getting sweaty, but specifically that I'm supposedly reporting myself and my behavior, and therefore I deserve to have action to be taken upon myself. This would show, not only because at the time there was discussions going about whether or not Twitter was for or against the harassment on it. Oh no, they're for it. They are for it, certifiably. Because they would force me to delete posts ultimately, which I don't care anything about, but they would ultimately have me delete posts as though I was guilty of something, but they would also issue a punishment against me as though I am responsible for this madness. I said, and I quote, that this meant that not only do they not find in the ongoing harassment of Evil Art or in the tactics of mass deplatformation mobs, like that which was made popular by people like Carlos Maza, an action which violates the Twitter terms of service, they're in fact promoting it and they're endorsing it, because this post is still up. There are still others doing this to other artists who are getting away with it. Not only are they getting away with it, but they're being clapped and patted on the back for doing so. And it's worse because this is cross-deplatforming. It's not just they're attacking him on Twitter, they're attacking his Patreon, they were attacking his Patreon, they were attacking his Twitter, they were attacking his they were attacking his DeviantArt, they were attacking any resource that it was linked to him. Nothing happened to them, but to me, oh, they went through and issued me punishments and violations to myself, which would then become funnily used leading up into the future, where, if you've been following me, you knew that this was something that led to me getting locked when I was reporting on Katie Hill and her lesbian shenanigans. But that's an entirely different conversation for another time. But the point is, this is the point where I and all the people watching this got certifiable proof in our hand. Twitter doesn't fucking care about these problems that are happening on their platform because they don't know how to deal with the problem. For the agents that I had to deal with, because originally, when I was suspended, I was supposed to be suspended for an entire year because I was supposedly promoting harassment. I wasn't. No one can find any proof of this. There is none because it doesn't exist. They first started off with, you were endorsing harassment, to where they said, and I quote to my face, you're supporting harassment because you, as a white person, wouldn't understand. To the point that when I had a conversation with the agent in question, I had to talk to their supervisors, because their supervisor had to go and tell this person, no, this person is not white. They're black. They're mixed race, actually. And then, after I gave them the archives of this behavior, they said, well, we want to take it down, because we clearly see that this is indeed what you sent us, but our bot marked it as being harassment because you were giving us links to tweets, and it just looked at your tweets and claimed that you were harassers. That was fun. That was cute. So this is the point where, in all of this, it becomes clear that if we're going to call out harassment, we have to call it out and call it out by name. We can't just let it be a thing where we report it to Twitter and we just assume that it's going to be taken care of. That's not how it works. We would have to take an active approach in this. And this, of course, is what led to us getting to the point here, where I would explain very, very plainly and very clearly, especially in the case of Ramos Isaac, where I would say that I rag on him and his audience because of the concerns of art edit Twitter, but in all seriousness, there's literally nothing that he can do, or that others like him could do to really solve this problem. Because the problem is that it's not specifically certain artists doing this. It would go on to be that there are people who are doing it. Not at this time, but around this time, where it's not concerned in the way that it was. It's not people like Ramos Isaac that we need to be worried about. It's these crazy fucking sycophants that are taking it as a liberty upon themselves that they think they can be able to effectively censor people like this. This is the behavior that we'd have to curb. We have to call it out every time it happened. We would have to do it. We can't wait for Twitter to do it, because they already have freedom to say, oh, it is or it isn't, because this is how it would go on. It would become clear that this would happen often. And it would lead us to here, where people like Lisa Nani, would have to call this out. Where there are artists trying to shame others on the internet, and that they're doing so because they're being insufferable brats. People can draw whatever the fuck they want, and that you quote tweeting them to your abysmal follow base is just doing nothing but festering the online bullying and painting targets for that artist's back, and that they need to fucking stop it. This behavior, this action, this move, would start to make it possible that we could be capable to solve the issue. Because now, it's not just enjoyers of the artwork. It's not just people who are fans of the artwork. It's not just other people who are talking about this now. It's not just people like myself. It's not just people like Arcana of. It's not just people like Mord Knight. It's not just people like For Etchy Tasty. It's not people like Kate Versus. It's not just people like us. Now the artists are fucking pissed because you won't leave them alone. This would develop. The situation would start to get worse. Because now that the artists are taking an active interest in calling this out, people start to double down. They triple down. They quadruple down. And we start seeing opinions like this. Opinions from people like this individual, who tried to block me before they thought I would be able to archive what they said. Goo goo gaga, I'm women and eyes that are over-sexualized, objectified, wabbles, and teen girls with big, good, huge bajungas. Just absolutely the biggest of wahoo jugaroos. So checkmato, feminism gaga goo goo pee pee poo poo. I crave intel pengy approval, please by my ugly hand why art. Goo goo gaga, I'm white rabbit and I over-sexualize women of color and orientalize Japanese anime webbers to give him objectified, ugly body proportions. But I'm above reproach and ridicule because I'm woman. Ooh woo. Poo poo pee pee. Me being a woman and drawing ugly hentai means you can never say anything bad about men who draw ugly hentai again. You hideous hairy man hating feminist lesbians. You're the real misogynoid. Can't stand these untalented bitches. Go make a pleb comic, stinky. There can be what to draw. Okay, don't make ugly hentai then, ma'am. Take an anatomy class instead of wasting your time making stupid strawman anti-SJW comics about how oppressed you are for being horny and how dumb feminists are. Look, I'm not saying art can't never be sexy, or that sexy ladies aren't a bad thing. My point is that women who use the fact that they draw hentai and etc. to justify the misogyny of men in society as a whole are fucking annoying and stupid as hell. Mal, how's mad? And of course, people, rightfully mocking them, as we had just demonstrated, come in and tell them to their face, show me where the doodle harmed you, and the large breast burned their skin. And because this person tried to target the shit at me, I call it out. I say preemptive blocking of people you want to block with a hot take erases, while erasing the women who would disagree with you. The hoes are mad. Opinion immediately archived and discarded. This is the point, right here in October, because it would start to get worse in November, because I believe this post by Lisa was made in November. This one right here. Yes, this was made in early November. So right here, in late October, about a week before Lisa's post. This is the behavior that starts to happen because of this. Because we start self-policing, people like this decide to say, oh, it's everyone's wrong. It's not just the men who are misogynists. These women, oh, they want the male attention. They want to be picked. They want to be picked so badly to be one of the good ones. They refuse to admit that there are people who disagree with them. And instead of accepting that there are people who disagree with them, they decide to blanket it as any woman who disagrees with them, they're just an incel desiring female who wants attention from the male masses. That if they're commenting on this problem, that they are the ones that are wrong. Not them. The women. Women like Nani. Women like Lame Squid Inc. Women like Melanie Mack. This behavior would continue developing and getting more and more toxic, where Demon Trist would call the shit out by fucking name. For those of us constantly telling us that these people bitching every single day about drawings aren't going to affect the real world, they just ban Iago hoodies at cons. Faces, just faces, but no sexual content other than the expressions, to the point that even women can't wear them. We're literally re-entering the 1950s, limiting women and what they can wear. It will not hesitate to censor cosplays, and even will take down the panty booth. Y'all know which one we're talking about. And yeah, I do. This is a direct attack on free speech, because there is no question about it. Say what you want about Iago hoodies. People are personally fan of wearing them. But not allowing articles of clothing that cover the body is beyond ridicule and childish behavior. You know why nobody follows? You know why no one follows the U.S. code flag for respect? Like, code respect for flag laws? It's because it's dumb and it's against free speech. This allowing people to wear the U.S. flag is nothing short of silly and incompetent, and so is banning the Iago hoodies. There are cons that already ban Nerf guns and weapon props like Long Beach Comic Con, and it's that it was lucky as fuck to go to the right guy that wasn't strict about the rules and let him specifically get his props inside. Saying that men hate women for hating the ban on Iago hoodies is nothing short of childish, stupid, and absolute buffoonery. Your dogshit lol men statements don't work on free-thinking individuals. Why? Because they're not accustomed to your shitty tribal fear-mongering. They would also then have another post that comes down and explains this as well. This is one from early October. Let me get this straight. The SGWs that are raging and screaming about anime titties and accusing artists of crime that they didn't admit, and they're taking their accounts down. But people like me, we're the fragile ones for calling out on your hypocrisy and your bullshit. What kind of fucking logic is this? What kind of shit is this? And I agree, it's dog shit. Because there is no argument here. This is when they double down and start to try to win an ideological argument. But no. It gets worse. Oh boy, does it get fucking worse. Hi. Hello. It's editing Carl. This is where I need to interject and stop drunk Carl, because he goes on to be a big mouth and say some shit that he shouldn't have said. And I need to explain what he's talking about here when he talks about how it gets worse. This requires a little bit of information. Right. So, there is an individual that right now, to my knowledge, at the time of this recording, and at the time of the recording of that, which is technically yesterday, and then earlier this morning, and about 3-ish hours ago, that, I was associated by both business and friendship to a person whose last name I am not aware of, and whose first name I know to be Lauren. Lauren, for all the credit I could try to give her without really dogging her ass, when I have every reason to dog her ass. Any person who knows who I am and what I'm talking about knows what I'm talking about. Lauren, by definition, is what we would call a clout chaser. For their time being on Twitter, the majority of what they did was cause, grievances for everybody. Grievances for friends, grievances for her workers and employees, grievances for her mutual connections because of the behavior she would exhibit. As I think I discussed so far in this point in the video, But I had been doing an investigation for about a month and a half, from the end of November all the way throughout the month of December, looking up some connections in relation to her behavior on the platform and people who had she been harassing. Um, this investigation, which would then become very well documented and well known for what ended up coming out of this investigation, blew up on a website that I'm not going to say the name of, mainly because it's not relevant to this situation. But what is relevant is the thing that made me start the investigation in itself. Lauren, despite all of the time she would spend to try and project and, saber rattle about how devout a protector she was of people's opinions and actions, Lauren herself was one of the many people, much like the individual that I'm speaking to in this shot and in a couple and in the other shot referencing them. She is as bad and was as bad and was behaving as badly to no one's fucking knowledge until I was able, and others that were harassed by her had been able to discover, when I did a deep dive into the backstory of how many people she had been harassing. Much like in a situation example like Tomato Magica, one of the other people who are one of the very well-known prolific woke scolders that went about trying to harass artists, much as one of the more recent cases, the Shinro AERF account, who changed his name so that he could try to escape the persecution he rightfully deserved for his behavior. Lauren was doing her dirt in secret. This person here is one of the victims. They are themselves a woke scolder by every degree. I'll say their name. But they are by every degree as bad as Lauren is, perpetuating a cycle of violence. Because when I was brought into the situation involving this individual here, I was supposed to be brought in to defend Lauren on the behalf of her, because she was trying to avoid taking responsibility for her actions. And also the person who this person is dating is a well-known clout chaser who likes to abuse people. I went in her defense to defend her on this program that the partner of this person runs. This person, you could probably do it on my channel if you really look hard enough. This person tried to shame my character on the program. Basically, they were trying to make a 2 minutes of hate situation. They were trying to dog me out and dog out whoever was defending Lauren. They were trying to antagonize me and use my face in my picture and harassing me as a way to be able to get over on her, because the entire reason they wanted to bring people on this channel of theirs that they were streaming on to do this live show was so that they could antagonize them and basically bring them to be mocked. It didn't work out in their favor. They didn't get what they wanted. They tried really hard to do it. And I could make a video about that, but it's not necessary. The person in question is irrelevant. But what is relevant is that this person, despite them being a toxic piece of shit just as badly as the person was, this individual certifiably was harassed by Lauren, dogged out for several months on end. From the time period in which I had known Lauren, when I started actively posting and making video content, so around about February, all the way up until that live stream happened, and sometimes a couple of times afterwards, including for about a period of about 8 months, Lauren had been harassing this individual. And I asked them to tell me any other individuals whom this had happened to. And they did. Many of these individuals did not come to comment. Some didn't want to be known, and they didn't want their names listed, which is why names are redacted here. And they were able to inform me that one of the people whom I know of was also a victim of this abuse. They don't detail what abuse they went through, but basically, generally, to summarize what this person had said when I had spoken to them after this stream that I'm talking about. They came to tell me that, essentially, she was consistently harassing her for a period of time, on and off again. They did everything they could to try to avoid her. But the boyfriend of this person, the partner, they wanted to drum up and use Lauren as a woke scold example of, look, here's a person who just keeps harassing us. They're a shitty person. They were using this individual to try and make boost for their own brand. And because they are a person who likes attention, they use this opportunity with Lauren harassing them to constantly trigger her. Um, they used Lauren to get attention and views, to stump up and, give them the buzz up. Didn't work out for them the way they wanted to. And in a moment of clarity, they listened and came and told me what I asked because I have no reason. As much as I dislike the person that this person is dating, as much as I dislike the person in this screenshot and in the other screenshot of them as well, I have no animosity for this person. I ultimately don't care. They are, by definition, what I would call a chud hunter, 100%. I would call them a pronoun thumper, 100%. But harassment is wrong. And I can be able to put aside anything to just simply say, don't harass people. And the thing here that happened was the harassment. Now, sadly, because Lauren was a person who was making multiple accounts to be able to avoid bans, the majority of the harassment in question that I would like to show you to prove what they said was true, I wouldn't be telling you about it if it wasn't, but the harassment in question no longer exists. The accounts were banned, and with them went the evidence. But I asked them about this information that they had to give, and they did indeed pass it along to me. Here, I asked them if people would be open to giving me the information that I would need. I informed them that I was the person who was doing the investigation on Lauren, and that ultimately I was the one that broke the news that she was doing the abuse. And that was basically that. As for the other person in question, the other person does not want to be named. So, I made sure to redact said information so that that information would not come up in the video. What happened to this individual, they go into detail about. And it goes as follows. Lauren followed them randomly back when Lauren legitimately had only 200 followers. So, knew them before Lauren made it, got big, bought followers for some of her account brands. They thought that they were a funny, average, edgy, anti-SJW, but around the time when this individual came out as trans, Lauren just went off on them for absolutely no entirely reason whatsoever. I don't know if it was because Lauren was being Lauren. I'm not sure if it was because this was a specific reaction to this individual. I'm not sure if this is because Lauren felt that her brand and her status and whatever things that she could use for her advantage to get attention were threatened by them, but this is what happened. Lauren also said to them that their art sucked and it looked very CalArtsy, but then the next day went back to being the friend and reaffirmed that she in fact liked their art. So, gaslighting on top of just general shitty behavior and abuse. Then unfollowed again after Lauren got in a fight with Papa Girl Jake's girlfriend, the individual who I did not mention. And this person told them that they were both being retarded. Right around that time, this would be when Lauren ended up getting a thread on that site that I'm not going to mention. Not because I don't want to mention them, but because it's irrelevant to this situation. It was right around when Lauren had a thread on that website that people are terrified of, that she started to contact this artist again and retweeted the posts of their art, asking for them to come on to Escape Zero, which was is the, you could say, niche gamer knockoff that Lauren made as a company brand so that she could basically outsource her normal brand of Twitter antagonization using it to antagonize people that, while certifiable creeps and abusers, serial abusers, in the case of someone like Magician Type 1, it was a shitty way of trying to do it and was irresponsible as someone who wanted to put herself in the category of a reporter. It was from this website and from this behavior that that Lauren invited this artist to come work for the site, much like she had also invited another person who ended up leaving after I left from the situation that happened. When they learned what happened specifically between myself and Lauren. It was also at this time that when they asked what they would be paid as a wage for working, that Lauren informed them that they wouldn't be, and ignored and ghosted them. And I was present for that because I was present for the breakdown about that situation and about this person in question. She did send them back some work, and Lauren said that they would ask her partner, Helmet, the one who's currently in control of and is running Escape Zero, if they would want to hire them. And then Lauren herself was Baker acted because of not just the online behavior that they were exhibiting, but also because the family was becoming concerned with her behavior and actions. So they put her away into the hospital in the place where she lives. And then they go on to say that they hadn't heard from them since. And there was also then the incident, which I myself was present for, where some lefty animation studio people were antagonizing this artist. And Lauren went out of her way to take the artist out of context. And it ended up with them being stalked by several hundred people that would not leave them alone, because it basically made them look like a woke scolder, much like the individual who I was discussing. I'm gonna say it in the clip, but I'm going to reiterate it here again. It was unacceptable. This is dog shit behavior. It's not okay. It doesn't matter if they're people who you hate and you dis-fucking like. Shit like this, and shit like what Lauren was doing to this woman. Not the person on the screen here, but the other one. What Lauren was doing to them is unacceptable. It's not okay. Much like I said at the top of the video, it's not okay that people were doing this shit to Pedantic Romantic. It was not okay when people were doing this shit to me. It was not okay when people were doing this shit to artists. And it's certainly not okay when other people with opinions do this to other people. Period. Doesn't matter for what reasons. It's not fucking okay. So, just wanted to cut in here and explain that. I'll let y'all get back to it. This is fucking unacceptable. I'm disgusted. I am disgusted by this. Learning this after the fact, after everything that we had been put through with this individual, is bad enough. But to learn that artists were being harassed for things that had nothing to do with the fucking art, wrong. It was fucking wrong. This would be the point where we got to the point where now, in the future, where we are here, we would begin to see behavior like this. Specifically, wrong one. Specifically, from people like Tomato Magica. Tomato Magica made an infamous post, which I'll look up real quick. A notable amount of the supposed wild men posts were in the style of the Hire Me Nintendo posts. Tomato Magica created a post antagonizing people about supposed men not being able to draw women correctly, because that's what's Kino. harass the men because clearly they're just misogynists and they just draw women because they're horny online, not because they want to draw women and make them look good. Because in art, you can make people look fantastical, and that's the entire point. But Tomato Magica, one of the many people who would cause everybody to also recognize that this is bad behavior that they're engaging in, and that they're constantly doing. Specifically, after their "Why are men" posts, they would go on to make this post. Now the teenage robot inflation porn dude is gonna preach to us. And the reason why this happened is because they wanted to commission an artist to make some art for them. And the artist wanted, and this is specifically Tomato Magica in insulting them, by the way. Not them reciting another artist doing this, but this person themselves, a supposed artist, antagonizing someone who wanted to commission them for work. They wanted to commission someone for some art. Tomato Magica antagonizes him by saying, "I don't draw fetish art." They respond by telling them, "I don't want to have fetish art made. I'm hurt that you would accuse me of this." And then forego to tell them that your account is nothing but porn and fat fetish art. I don't care. I don't work with people like you. Bye. And then posting this loud and proud on the platform as though they had an argument. They didn't. They didn't have an argument. This was shitty behavior. Not just as an artist, but also as a human being interacting with another person. Doubled down about it and said, by the way, he had a porn icon and some dummy screen names before I offended him, so he changed it to this. This behavior led plenty of people calling out this individual. Rightfully so. Fellow artists, this is not how you should treat people who want to commission you. Do not assume that they are going to ask for porn because the commissioner likes porn. Just simply tell them nicely that you don't do it. Don't be rude like this. And that it was notable that it's always a good sign that when a person searches up someone like this that they don't recognize and they just find out they already have them blocked for a reason. And the reason people had them blocked is because this individual was famed on Tumblr for being a person who took art from Love Live and made it, well, Tumblr-y. As you can see, here's a card from Love Live. Here's the redraw that they chose to make. Here's another card from Love Live. Here's another way that they chose to remake it. As you can clearly see, this artist is a person who describes himself to the woke agenda. Specifically that it's acceptable to make characters that are white, black, and characters that are not only horny drawn as diverse POCs, but choose to do so to claim, hire me to make your disgusting cards not as disgusting. Woke scolding. Woke scolding people about their work while attempting to tell people about how they are problematic when they're not. This would then lead to us seeing multiple situations and occasions and bases where we had other artists being harassed. Up here is Jokan Hugh. Jokan Hugh made a Deus Vult meme. An anime-styled Deus Vult chibi art meme. They were woke scolded by a fuckload of people who antagonized them for no other reason than because they were supposed people who wanted to have opinions. Because Johanyu was not familiar with the English language, they used this, as the Baishwa they are, to antagonize them into deleting their art and their post into apologizing for something that they never fucking did. Of course, they continue to draw to this day, but this would be where the entire internet said, no, this needs to fucking stop. Because Johanyu would go on to say that they voluntarily deleted the tweet because they were informed about the situation and didn't want to hurt people. This is one of the examples of why it became so important for us to self-police. Because this behavior is unacceptable. Period. Wholesale. It's not okay. It's not okay. to harass an artist for something that is not racist, or is not bad, or is not wrong. It's not acceptable to harass them, period, whatsoever at all. Because you feel upset that they drew something you don't like. And then to lie to their face and convince them that they did something that they didn't do. That's gaslighting. This would happen again after it happened to Johanyu, where it would happen to Ansel. Ansel drew this piece here. A wonderful, nice, beautiful piece. What did the person antagonizing them say? Okay, so I reported. Before I saw the rest of your work, the rest seems I saw was fine, but this looks like a 13-year-old kid who wants to suck your dick. What the fuck is wrong with you? Get help! I'm not fucking kidding! Seriously, if you're not 13, 16, get help. And if you are, don't fucking post it online. I can barely write because it makes me choke. The only people who want to see this are people who want to have sex with children. Rightfully so. People called out this woke scolding behavior and antagonized them the way they antagonized Ansel. Because, as one of my followers, Infamous Farks, said, as the artist Ansel is being harassed, I should state that if your first reaction to a drawing is a 13-year-old wanting to suck your dick, the problem is that you think it's a 13-year-old and that they want to suck your dick. Kindly piss off and leave the artist the fuck alone. And that's not even mentioning the part where they antagonize them by saying that the only people who want to see art like this are people who want to have sex with children. Antagonizing and labeling Ansel but as a pedophile and as a CP producer, because they draw themselves a truly high-quality picture that they didn't personally like, because they saw something in it that wasn't there, that they didn't put there, and that they decided to antagonize them about. And of course, Ansel themselves reported this in their native language, which I believe was Russian. Guys, I'm freaking out, and I'm not fucking kidding. Some people are blaming me on DeviantArt for Table of Things, and threw a report on my art. Do you think that the girl's face evokes the same associations? It's like they poured a bucket of slop early in the morning on me. In my opinion, such associations can arise in a person who is in himself ill, turned on this topic and sees this everywhere, because I could not even imagine that someone would have such thoughts when looking at my work. And the work is already 2 years old, during this time which no one pointed this out to me. So not only is it that somebody decided to have this reaction about their work after seeing a 2-year-old fucking piece, but decided to assume that it had to be CP, cheese pizza, because they themselves did not understand that they are assuming things that are not fucking real, are not fucking there, and do not fucking exist except in their own goddamn mind. It continues. Cool. Now they accused me about what I had happened to my account and also putting it on par with a patient. Specifically the person who's now reporting them, here, in this image. Couldn't even imagine that the tweet would fly like that. Thank you all so much for the support. You're just a miracle. And I complain about this person in support, and I hope... I was complain about this person in Twitter support, and I hope that they will soon take action. And then Ansel chose to repost some of examples of the art that had this kind of art style. Since such a booze is gone, I want to invite you to my public VK and Instagram, because I draw mainly lovely girls and that I love fem slash and slash, which I'm assuming is that they love female on female slash art, or female slash art. And as you can see, with the art style shown here in this Art Deco piece, that's 1920s inspired, and this additional piece, which is a bit more of a modern style, and this additional piece, showing 2 women, and this additional piece, showing a female Geralt and a female Jaskier, for the Witcher, that The reason why they assumed that this had to be supposedly a child was because they were not familiar with Ansel's art style and with their specific way of making art. They assumed that because they saw a young face and plump lips and seductive eyes, that it had to be a child. This, of course, tells us a lot about the mindset of the people who we're dealing with, and we'll cover this as we go forward because this is going to become explicit when we get to the end of this video. And we'll move on in time, or probably back in time in this case. Yes, back in time in this case, to September, my birthday, 17th, where someone decides to make a post. Specifically, lol, this guy's likes are full of anime porn. And that this would then be used as an excuse to antagonize a person, quoting the very now infamously known Bidoof's Law, which was, will there ever be anything more timelessly funnier on the site than seeing some joyless idiot asserting their stupid controversial worldview internet tough guy style, opinions internet tough guy style, and then getting checked on their blog and they're just completely, openly, and shamelessly addicted to hentai, which is easily then countered by the obvious logic of Typhlosion's Law, which is, have you ever just seen some dude trying to police others people on the internet tough guy style, and then you go on their profile and they're just completely shamelessly addicted to judging others because they like breasts and aren't disgusted by the idea of sexual intercourse. I tell this person, to their face, I hate to burst your bubbly, but people liking anime illustrations of characters and just even out their hentais and dojins is not a gotcha, and it's not an argument. It's just mildly confusing and it's out of context. So when you act like this, you look like a fucking idiot, because that's not an argument. And of course, this person, being a coward, tries to block me before they post this. This man's spending his birthday trying to convince me that it's cool and normal to jack off to cartoon girls. Which, by the way, is not what I fucking said. What I said is, attempting to antagonize people because they have a like of art is not the same to having an argument about their art. And I posted this by showing not only that this is confusing with one of my self-made cowardly dog memes, but also here with the normal people mental gymnastics versus the anti-anime mental gymnastics. Namely that people can make drawings. You don't have to like it, but you have to learn to let live and let die and let bygones be bygones. Compared to how this person's currently performing and acting, which is, well, you see, they like art, and they liked a specific kind of art, which means that they have to be something that was done, because if it's a small body, it has to be a child, and there is no such thing as people who are petite, and that adulted up means that the person's still a child because they were potentially still a child once, and that characters like Tifa Lockhart, they count as pedophilic, despite having childbearing hips, and being of age, and massive tits, and also adult, because, you know, maybe I could consider them to be something that they're not. But, you see, anthropomorphic furry porn, that's okay, because they're not real. That's not a case example of some bullshit. This is what I was trying to explain to this person, that they didn't want to hear, because of course they fucking didn't. Because of course they're like this. And namely, that this woke scolding of trying to shame me for something that I didn't say, that I don't think, and that I don't believe, is supposedly supposed to be the same thing as finding an actual pedophile in the wild. This is behavior that would repeat itself over and over again, because they only know how to repeat themselves. Here, with Otaku 920, deciding to flame bait with a whole bunch of people, saying, if you get aroused by drawings of fictional people, that would strongly indicate that you are, that you could potentially be threatening to real-life children. This is how bitchly sound adults think, essentially calling us all pedophiles, while having a picture of Lolicon as a profile picture. It was because of them saying this, and then following that shit up, by us clearly being able to see that this is fucking Lolicon that they're looking at. Which, by the way, I'm not dissenting against them by saying that they're supposedly a pedo because they're using this. It's just simply, I find it very ironic that someone who's trying to call everyone else a pedo is using something that they themselves should find to be pedophilic. You know, and the fact that they call themselves an otaku, which, that's interesting. It's this behavior that would become constantly repetitive because they just clearly don't understand that they're just constantly attacking an argument that no one said, no one implied, and that only them think in their own minds. Which would bring us to the point where we get to the point where you have people now trying to use this as an argument. Namely, the style of Japanese Eastern art where people draw characters as cute, and that when it comes to the Western territories, the way to supposedly make it so that an art is considered acceptable and okay is that we have to draw a character to look like a horrid fucking troglodyte. Because if we draw a character as ugly, if we draw a character to be unattractive, it means that nobody can get horny to them. Even though appreciating the human body would allow a person to appreciate these things in a way that is not comparative to what these people seem to assume. And this is mentioning the fact that a company would have a product westernized, which is actually to mean that they would become you have a chance to have an Anita Sarkeesian in a box to wake you up every morning, compared to the original product of the VR waifu that is in a comparative clock. This would be repeated over the arguments as time would go on, leading to current day now, which is an artist draws a young-looking 18-year-old character that is obviously above age. They're called a pedo. They draw a Neko girl, or any monster girl. You're glorifying savory and bestiality. They draw an otokonoko, or a trap. They are called a transphobe. They draw 18 plus not safe for work art. They're called a misogynist. And this would then follow up, after that, with one of my mutuals, Trill, following up this by saying, if it's S&M, you support rape! If it's a ship that's any age difference, like if it's a female character that's 21 plus and a character looks 16 and it's male, they're called a pedophile. Same thing if it's the same situation, but the sexes are reversed. If you draw big breasts, you're a misogynist. If it's a same-sex couple by an artist of the opposite sex, you're a fagotty, you're a cute bro, you're homophobic. But then when somebody draws something like, you want to fuck animals without fail, the same type of people are going to sit down and say, whoa bro, calm down, it's obvious not realistic, it's not real. If you have a middling ground of having comparative bust, it's called fetishization. This would happen, and it continues to happen, and has never stopped happening since all the way back in January of 2018, leading into 2019, leading now 2 years ago, 2 years now into 2020, where this behavior is continued in the exact same fashion and style. It led to the point that I made a point of calling out that the people who are saying this about art don't seem to understand that the places that they're trying to woke scold from, in one of my very big posts that blew up, that the people from the UK, like the BBC, a place which allowed for for Seville to rape many people while in their employ, are the same groups that years before this news report was even made at the time of 2017, which is still cognizantly aware to today, because there are still cases of sexual exploitation and sexual rape gangs happening in the UK to this day now, showed up and compared this against an actual number of research that was done by the United Nations Offices on Drugs and Crime, the United Nations themselves being a joke when it comes to supposedly stopping pollution and stopping harassment and stopping sexual crimes. But they did a study where they studied that Japan themselves, with all of the statistics of the sexual offenses and the rapes at a national level, which themselves left out that the majority of these cases were happening where a family member of a victim were themselves victimizing a person. Comparative between these regions that try to woke scold to Japan, they have higher rates of sex crime than Japan themselves. Which goes on to explain that people who try to woke scold an audience is supposed to be the same ones that are going to try to moralize to us about who is and who isn't committing sins in art. Which is just a point of to say, you should check out your own fucking backyard. And mind you, this article was written by the same person who would be challenged by the Girls and Panzer artist, right here, in this image, where they are told to their face, real-life children need protection, and that lines of ink on paper, they do not, because they are not real. And if you try to say that creations of the mind are going to influence people, and they're going to create behavior And that people who create those and their behavior should be critiqued and held responsible for the actions that are actually themselves doing it. What you're doing is you're not preventing crimes. You're thought policing. And that, everything I've shown you to this point and going on to continue, is that you're not arguing for anything salient. You're not arguing for anything smart. You're thought policing. You're thought policing because you don't actually have an argument. You just say, think of the children, think of the women. And you're not actually explaining why it's wrong. What you're doing is you're fear-mongering. And you're trying to scare people. And it's not going to work against people who are strong-willed. Because they're not just going to bend because you claim that they're offending people. That's not how it works. A smart person who can see the difference between an actual case of toxic behavior, like Tomato Magica, and a person who draws a piece of art, like Ansel, these things are not one and the same. You cannot claim that they are. Because all you're doing is proving that the person who should be looked at is not them, it's you! But clearly, people didn't understand this. Because I would then go on to be accused by multiple individuals that I was, and I quote, a pedophile defender. I was a pedocaper. I was responsible for protecting pedophiles. People who were in support of it were being in support of it, but saying that it is a case of lolly. People saying that it's a blind spot for pedophilia, that their animated porn featuring literal children is made because it's supposed to be attacked for it. All of these things and all of these cases. They're saying that the crime statistics on the region, despite the crime statistics not coming from Japan, but coming from the UN studying Japan, are inaccurate. A lot of people lost their fucking shit, including a person who would choose to double down and tell me how I was wrong. And I told this person, to their face, that they were wrong, and they chose to tell me I only did it because I wanted clout. I only made the post because I wanted attention. I only made the post to make a name for myself. And when this shit came up again, I asked them to give me a fucking apology in triplicate, because the thing that they were doing was wrong to have done in the first place, and should not have been done whatsoever at all. Because, what was being reported then was that there were rape gangs, the same rape gangs which I had reported on before in one of my videos about the state of the UK. A rape gang would go on to abuse people, that the police were protecting these individuals from being investigated because they were terrified of being called racist, which was already reported from the top of 2019, and the top of 2017, and the top of 2018. This person went on to ignore this. So I called them out about it, on the spot. Reported by Orwell and Good, where all of these examples were done, because they didn't want to report it. They were misreporting it. They were mislabeling the people who were doing it. All of this information came out. And on top of me calling them out, and telling them to their face that they didn't know what they were talking about, I told them very clearly that the crimes that they're trying to cry and complain and say are just being reported on out of context for clout. It's not being reported out of context for clout. It's that the crimes are still happening. And that you're trying to malign something that you claim is not real as a non-problem, when the real problem itself still exists. But, moving on from there, we have people who at this time, back in the past, around about October, would choose to claim people like myself and mutuals of mine are supposedly on a shame list because animated titties are bad. And if you think that animated titties are not bad, you get put on the shame list. Because nudity is unacceptable no matter the context and no matter the appreciation of art itself. Because the body itself is sinful and wrong. And that people who choose to not be terrified of this art should be mocked because they choose to do so. Holler if you recognize yourself here in this spread, because I never make it into these things, because I always change my profile picture on purpose. Because these people are insane and they try to label people because they don't know how to actually argue. this would continue to the future, what we would see, by self-admittance, an individual who commits actions where they claim rules and laws that they don't understand, try to cite them as examples to remove these people from the internet. This being the same case basis of behavior that was used against evil art to be used against people like myself and others, again in the future. Namely, them going and trying to pull up the Justice.gov information, claiming that child pornography is not protected under the First Amendment of life and is illegal contraband under the federal law of the subsections, and that this material is considered illegal because they don't read it, and they didn't read it twice, and they didn't read it again. And the reason why they didn't read it twice and they didn't read it again is because they didn't actually understand the reason why it's important. And I pointed out to them the reason why this is important, because this goes under the point of indistinguishable. When we talk about cheese pizza, and we need to talk about this briefly while we're going on here in this explanation. When we talk about supposed cheese pizza, and what a person is and isn't doing, and what a person is and isn't responsible for taking part of, and what a person is and isn't capable of being heard for. When you talk about cheese pizza, you need to understand that there is multiple case bases and examples about why and how cheese pizza is and is not acceptable. And the reason why is because of things like Tracy Lords. So, Tracy Lords, if you didn't know, Tracy Lords, originally by the name of Nora Louise Kuzma, is a woman, who, at this age, is a porn star. A former porn star. Whatever you want to call her. In her early career, when she was still underage, she used a fake ID to join into the porn industry and star in a series of X-rated films. When the police was informed that she was a minor during the taping of these films, the entire industry and the FBI together worked together to remove all of these pictures of her underage, leading to multiple court cases and all of her pictures, to remove them all from the public eye and remove them from backlogs and catalogs, because her entire fucking career after being illegal was illegal. She went on to be a mainstream actress and to act in multiple fucking things, but this is an important key basis that needs to be understood. And the reason why it needed to be understood as unacceptable is because this is the person why those laws were made. The reason the porn laws exist and the reason people try to apply them to art is because of Lords and how she lied. Another case basis to understand and exist is that when you try to use the CSEM laws, the cheese pizza laws, made about exploitative material, is that when you try to label art that you think is porn as cheese pizza, it's not. Because you need to first define how it is. And you can't. Because you don't know anything about the age. And I'm going to be covering this in a different video about another topic and subject about something that just came up. But the point I'm trying to get to explain here, is that these people do not understand what at all they know what they're talking about. And the reason they don't know what they're fucking talking about is because, as we would see demonstrated here, in this giant-ass post that I made, you would have people who would lead you to think, in this logic here, that art made about characters like My Hero Academia is considered wrong and disgusted because the characters in question, they're underage. But in comparison, in actuality, they're over here fetishizing teenage characters. And I'll show this briefly. They'll say when it's done to girls, it's wrong. Because these people have a fucking hate boner for Hiroshi. But at the same time, they'll sit here fujishing it the fuck up, being hot for teacher over supposed characters that are underage, because they consider Todoroki and Deku porn, or Kiribaku porn, to be the height of perversion. They'll have fun antagonizing people because of Kiribaku porn drawn by people like Sakimi. They'll say, Nezuko, no, this is wrong. But Kiribaku, oh, it's hot. It's delicious. It's right. It's just to exist. No fucking cognizance of mind. It'll go worse, where they'll outright say it's okay to do it because it's girls. When the boys, that it's okay, that it's bad to do it to the girls because it's the girls, but it's okay to do it to the boys because it's the boys. We'll even see case examples where K-pop stans, like this one, will antagonize Ren Tosucker and his girlfriend. Hello? Boy, what a glow up. So, we would have case examples like this user antagonizing Ren and his girlfriend because they don't like the fact that they were called out about their hypocrisy. Namely, they attacked Ren and his girl because they were salty as shit. Antagonizing what they looked like, antagonizing their picture and shit. And Ren, as a king, clapped back to their face by calling out how foul they're being. This behavior would continue because of the people's inability to argue things. Made multiple threads about this as archive information, but the thing to glean from this is that this is the point where we've gone from people are trying to make art. People harass artists. People then double down harassing the artists, trying to remove them from the internet. K-pop stans use methods to harass people who are dissenters, and then not only harass them to their face, but report them as pedophiles, because this is the thing that got Ren removed from the internet. Or removed from Twitter. They report him as a pedophile, and then antagonize him and brag about them. Because they don't have the ability to have arguments. They just don't. No cognizance of mind to understand that this makes them wrong. It makes them look bad. And this behavior continued to the point where you have people like this individual. Much like the one who jumped into my mentions. That made me make this entire video. Where they go on to A-log about people like Shadbase. And that they're this monster. Because of their shit. That they're problematic. Because they choose to have opinions. And that any person who that confronts them to their face is supposedly getting away with something that they're not guilty of getting away with. They're not harassing people. They're just A-logging about them and trying to get them deplatformed off the internet. This behavior continues to the point where we would then get one of the people who was responsible for the false flagging of multiple people, including myself and Ren Tosucker and all other artists that I follow, using a method where they outright admit that they are trying to fearmonger, claiming that people archiving their tweets is harassment and incitement of harassment, when they outright blatantly admit that to people like our crossbows, who fucking mock them to their face because a whole bunch of tankies got mad as shit at them, that they admit that they just report people's accounts when they look for material that they can pass off as pedophilia, that they can pass off as child porn, as they can pass off as whatever the fuck they want to say it is. They use this as a case example to be able to instigate and propagate said violence against people because they feel justified in doing so. This leads us to where we get to now. Specifically, where we get to good old people like this piece of fucking work. Shinro. as he's decided to change his name recently. Lying. Blatantly lying. Antagonizing people. Like this artist here. Antagonizing the artist about their work. Because they like to draw artists with breasts. Antagonizing them as being monstrous, as being wrong, as saying that they are justified by their religion to antagonize them as so. While at themselves liking and following and reposting pictures of this quality. It sounds a lot like the same shit earlier before when it comes to the Beto thing. But no, it gets worse. Not only does this person repost roleplay accounts and art from roleplay accounts from people like that are using art from people like Sakimi, not only do they antagonize and attack these artists and they attack these cosplayers, they double down. They double down, going so far to constantly antagonize these people and do some real dumbass Renfist shit. Constantly reporting account after account after account after account after account by labeling them as graphic content of graphic violence and adult content that's not allowed on the platform, despite the fact that by the fucking Joe Rogan podcast themselves, you have Jack Dorsey himself saying that it is allowed to have material on the internet. You can have not safe for work on the platform as long as you label it, and he indeed labeled it. He would go on to try to make posts like this, that accounts he's reporting them because they're not of age, when actually this is him playing the victim. I reported on this myself, reported him for what he was doing to the artist, and I also doubled down by showing that he is being hypocritical. That he's not learning from his behavior. And actually, he's just collecting this catalog of people he thinks are representative of this bad behavior. It's gotten so bad to the point that the internet as a whole, not just American and US Twitter, but Japanese Twitter, started making call-out posts against him, signifying and showing how bad this behavior has gotten. Brings us to the point in the future now, where we have other people other than myself calling out this, and showing that he is guilty of harassment and abuse himself, using the same tactics which he seems and claims were justified, now himself being reported for them when he was not justified to do them in the first place. The circle coming full circle, as it were. And other artists and other individuals reporting Shiro himself because they are acting delusional and changing his act to be able to get away with doing this behavior. You know, the behavior of reporting people and acting as though if you had nothing to hide, why you're running. That whole thing. Got to the point where the harassment continued, where Sakimi and other people like them at the time were being harassed by people in general. People claiming that Sakimi's wonky-ass drawings are fucking disgusting because the character is clearly underaged and are being looted. This referring to the meme of looting underage characters is, don't loot the platelets from of cells at work. Don't loot the dragon lolly of Kobayashi's Dragon Maid. Don't lewd characters like Nezuko, because since the character from Demon Slayer looks like a child, it means that they themselves shouldn't be looted because it's pedophile if you did so. The person in question, and the people in question, who are doing this, wholesale, tried to use an argument that the people who are wrong for doing this, they're not human beings. And the people who are doing this are human beings. And the reason that this was done was because we had a person, in the case of a user, like Violet Myers, antagonizing people because they chose to have themselves a porn star, who makes step fantasy material, choosing to antagonize people who would point out that, oh, she has sex with the operator of her fan account, and that they should delete their account because they're just wrong on things. And I clapped out Violet on this because they clearly did not understand. They were just committing themselves to said behavior of inherent nastiness. Namely, that Violet was okaying this behavior because the followers in question were people who were doing things that they approved of, and that she was wrong in case because she herself is she's doubling down on that whole thing, you know? I made it brief in my explanation because this is how the logic goes when it comes to fantasy, right? If you cosplay a character that could be considered as a juvenile, as underage, regardless of the age of consent itself being 18 plus, if your entire point is that if people have art, they make art, they appreciate art, that is of something underage, that is aged up to be of consent limits, and you say they are wrong for doing so because they are cosplaying something that is supposedly trash, if you cosplay these same underage characters, you yourself are committing an action that is pedophilic. Because if it's cheese pizza when people age up the character, it is cheese pizza when you are looting the character. Hi, yes, hello, me again. So, before we can even begin to explain the insanity on your fucking screen, we need to talk about something else entirely first. So I'm gonna have to take you a bit of a ways back. To start this off, it goes a little something like this, right? Back at the beginning of all of this, there was a commonality problem that came with trying to understand and explain, for the most part, why people had opinions about art the way they chose to have them. One of those many beliefs and opinions was that, oh, artists, they're trying to have fun with drawing art because they just want to lewd the characters up. Because the obvious point here is that nobody wants to break the law. It's illegal to produce cheese pizza. But you have a character that you want to draw that canonically in universe, they are younger than what would be the approved age to make it legal. Air quotes or not. And one of the ways to do this is, rather than drawing the canonical character with the body proportions of the child, that you have to find a way in this loophole to allow your creativity to flow. This is the reason why almost every single account that draws art, now by force of law, because of it being how Twitter wants to rule itself and make it easier for them to yeet people off in an election year, you must have your art labeled as not safe for work and also labeled as 18 plus. That way, you can be able to stop people who are not of age from seeing it, on top of all the other tools that they use and have made available to people and have mostly always been available to people to make their art. It's why people like J Lullaby, it's why people like Evil Art, it's why people like Spaz Kid, it's why people like The Other Half, it's why people like Blue Breed. Some of my personal favorites, by the way, and Shadbase, obviously, of course, do this, and why it is always listed anywhere you can find it, especially on their own pages for donating to them, that you're going to be donating to the creation of 18 plus fetish art. Regardless of whatever you think it is, and regardless of whatever you could accuse them of, they're only guilty of just allowing their imagination to draw art, and they are making sure that you understand this is for adults only. You shouldn't be here looking at it if you're not. There are plenty of people, the person whose account was suspended in this image being one of the ones who had a very serious vendetta against this. And it led to an obvious factor, especially during the time when Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse was big in theaters, that it would lead both Spaz Kid and I can't remember the original artist of this one, quoted if you can remember, because I couldn't find it at the time of this recording, that Spaz Kid himself and the artist that drew the infinite sex pass Penny Parker made them for the explicit purpose that they were made for. And the explicit purpose that they were made for was, hey, before you lose your shit, just want you to know, she's of age, boys. The point being, don't lose your shit, because it's just art. Much like how we already saw with Sakimi, much how we saw already with Uncel, how we saw with any artist in question, this was part of said artist harassment. Artists being called pedophiles when they're not, because they're choosing to draw characters that they want to draw. And the only way that they can draw said characters is to age them up and to play with the design so that they may make said art. And people having upsetism fits about this. One of the ones who had an upsetism fit about this, most of all, including the person that was on screen a few seconds ago, I was explaining, Violet Myers. She was just the last of the ones in the timeline of all events to do what she had done, but she was not the only one to have done this. I covered this in a video on my channel already, but I'll recap it here in this explanation so that you can fully see what it is I'm talking about for yourself. Right? So, there are people like this and others like this who were having themselves entire whole ass debates because of the feeling they had looking at people's art and not understanding how they really factorialize this woke scolding behavior, as well as internalizing policing behavior, because their entire whole thing was that they thought, well, obviously we're right and they're wrong. So when people started to make infinite sex passes for said characters so that they may lewd them in art, they were starting to debate with themselves exactly how they were going to find ways to factorialize this in your mind. One of the first ones to do this was Rumeru. And Ru is known for having been the girlfriend of an artist who made this take. The take which was, my work is pedophilic. The weebs go, everyone's being mean to artists. It says cultural differences. Japanese artist, no, I am literally a pedophile who wants to have sex with young children. And weebs, still so much better than Cal Arts. Lord, Western art sucks. The dank take being that this is virtue signaling. Because Ru didn't think everybody knew, but I knew. But everybody knew that Ru in question was the girlfriend of the man on screen seen here, Lucas. Lucas is a pedophile who had sex with a 14-year-old girl and had a relationship and carried it on for some time. This, on top of other things as well, was revealed, and of course, Ru deleted said post from the internet, but not before I was able to archive it. The internal logic here being that this woke scolding behavior is unacceptable because not only is Ru a hypocrite, Ru was in a relationship with said boy, man, whatever you want to call him, the entire time this was going down, throughout the entirety of this, because this post in question is from October. Didn't say a single word about that, didn't mention a goddamn word, not a one. But had enough time to try to tell other people what they can and can't do. The second one, this one happening about 3 days before this one in question, if I remember correctly. Yes, this one happening about 3 days after this one happened, but being one that got less attention. You had a cosplayer by the name of Teakira who wanted to attack people that were celebrating and liking Sakimi's Nezuko piece, saying, hey, stop being a weirdo, please, and thanks. This cosplayer would then go on to lewd the sexy no jutsu for Naruto. And the argument that they were using was, hey, it's weird and wrong and very bad if you lewd characters that are not of age at the time that you choose to make fetish art about them, because it's weird, it's wrong, it's pedophilic. Despite not remembering that Naruto was 12 years old in the premiere episode. And we're talking literally the first episode, ladies and fucking gentlemen. This led the artist to then lock her account, because, of course, it did. The point being, the hypocrisy was very easy and very simple. This one in question was covered by Christina, and the one on Rue, I covered myself. There was other case examples of this in question, but the biggest example of this was when it came to Violet Myers. I think Drunk Carl nailed it as much as he possibly could, but I'll re-explain it so that people can understand why the insanity of this is fucked up. Violet Myers is a porn star. It is what it is. I ain't knocking your fucking... I'm not knocking what you're doing. I don't give a shit. I don't care. Not my problem. What she chooses to do is what she chooses to do. Why would I be upset or mad about that? I don't care. The thing that I care about is that she then tries to enter in and give us her salty, sweet hot take. And therein lies the problem with this here. The logic doesn't make sense, ladies and gentlemen, because as Drunk Me explains, the cosplaying that they choose to do concerning Gemma from Kakakiguru, she is considered juvenile, which is between the ages of 13 to 19. For the most part, I believe in the series, she's legal of age, but there is plenty of fetish art that exists of these characters that are 18 plus and have always been 18 plus in the series. Obviously, you know, perfect examples tend to be Nonon Zakuzure, because she too is 18 plus, and yet people lose their fucking shit because she has a petite body. The same logic applies here, especially when we get down to it, considering that Violet Myers is signal boosted by others who are going to come up later in conversation. So keep her in mind, because when they say she is right, when they talk about a porn actress being wrong or not, this is the one they're talking about. The point of why this is fucked up is because Violet Myers is known for a lot of porn, but specifically for this genre of step fantasy, which is why I censored this picture here that you can't see very clearly. But if you read the caption on the tweet in question, you can understand exactly why I censored this. The logic is simple. If it is wrong, because she was using the cosplayer's argument, if it is wrong that a person is underage and you age them up so that you may draw legal art of them, fetish or not, if you age them up and then you say, but it's still wrong though because they were once a child, then when you go on camera portraying a sibling of a family or relative getting plowed by their older brother, step or not, the inherent problem here is that obviously we can understand why this fantasy would be hot for some people. But by that same logic, that's weird as shit. Because let's say that character is supposed to be the obvious trope of the bratty younger stepsister, and the big brother is gonna lewd the shit out of them by porking them. This is where it falls apart. This is where the argument no longer exists. It's a weak argument to begin with, but when you start analyzing it for what it is, it falls apart. Because the same logic that Rue used, it falls apart as well. Obviously, if you're going to try and pick out a cherry-picked example, like the author of Rurouni Kenshin, okay, but that's not all of these other artists. You're trying to woke school people, and you're trying to thought police them, and it doesn't work. It doesn't work because it falls apart, because if everyone else is wrong, that means when you do this, you're also wrong. So either it's all okay, or none of it's okay. And the best way that all of it can be okay is that you have the disqualifier. You make the art obviously labeled as not safe for work. You obviously label and make it clear that you're not trying to draw cheese pizza. The characters are aged up. And also you make it so that only consenting adults are both entertaining themselves with it and watching it. The same restrictions that apply to the actual pornography here, this thing here, apply to the art. So why are you making case examples for this to be okay, but the other one not to be okay? It's inconsistent, and it's hypocritical. I just want to explain it. I'll let Carl take back over now. Where's your morals? Where do those come in for that? Because they're non-existent. This thing came back up again when this crossover happened. Because you see, it wasn't just that artists were being harassed. It's not just that people that appreciate the art were being harassed. Western artists, just like Japanese artists, comic book artists, were being harassed as this. The first one of which being J. Scott Campbell. J. Scott Campbell and other people like him being harassed because of their art, like this particular Medusa piece made by Franz Dukes, with people claiming, oh my god, again, men are trash and they shouldn't be allowed to draw women because they're drawing women unacceptably. This doubles down, where the conversation would continue in this way, where artists would get harassed by these individuals, having themselves an upsetism fit. Going from men aren't allowed to draw characters in women because they're just drawing them disgustedly, to teenage characters are being drawn as they're drawing uncomfortable characters because these grown-ass men just don't understand they're being pedophilic. Look at them drawing these characters all busty and boobidly. How dare you? How dare you draw fantastical depictions of art? 17-year-old girls don't look like this, mister. What are you doing? These are teenage characters. How could you? How could you do this? Ah! Having themselves an absolute fucking moment. Only to not remember, as a character, like Mord Knight. Mord Knight having the common sense to say, you realize the characters aren't real. They're not real. They're fiction. Fictional characters. The fictional characters from the past. Things that you choose to get upset about. Fictional characters. Fantastical art. Drawn because people appreciate the human body. Not because they're pedophiles trying to get away with their appreciation of it in the open. But people drawing art because they're drawing superhero characters, which are characters that are going to be drawn fantastical, because superheroes are fantastical. Indulging in the sense of the medium, for which they are popular and made and known for their art. People like Tim, people like Bruce Timm, people like people like J. Scott Campbell, people like Stefan Sejic and his wife Linda. Drawing fantastical characters. Miss Sakimi, your Nerd Wonder. Drawing fantastical characters like this with exaggerated styles and techniques because they appreciate the art. This is wholesale now blanket pedophilia because you decided to have an upset moment about it. Unacceptable. Unacceptable and wrong. It would lead to J. Scott Campbell being harassed about this, by name, directly. Not just because of his art before, but because of his Tiger Lily panel. A character who, in an alternate universe, gets aged up, but of course, you know, they decide to have themselves a crazy-ass fucking moment. And J. Scott mentions about this, appreciating the article, and that for all the people who stood up for him and the outrageousness of these salacious and inflammatory accusations, it's a scary time that we live in, where a few people can be able to rally to destroy your reputation in 100 tweets, and that it's unacceptable, and it shouldn't be allowed. And of course, people like Miss Sashi, one of the people I just mentioned, here in this post that we just mentioned, Sashi and other people, and other artists like her, are many of the case examples of the people who are on the front lines when it comes to the comics, much like how I am when it comes to the manga and the anime, calling out that this is unacceptable behavior and that this is wrong to happen, and no matter how many ways it happens. So, ultimately, it brings us to the point where we become cognizantly aware and informed that we have people that will make condemnations of artists, out of hand, out of pocket, and will choose to do so for no other reason than because they want to, and they feel they need to, and they feel they have to, because that gives them an angle and an opportunity to get away with doing so. No. Because the controversy allows them to be able to tar and feather a man, despite the fact that he does not do the thing that they do. And oh, it gets worse. It gets worse. Because J. Scott Campbell replied to this behavior, showing and demonstrating that it's tempting to really get discouraged by the negative comments on Twitter, but that even as a comment as broad and incendiary as this one will get 30,000 likes and 5K retweets in a little over a day. Because it's just how it is. Negativity exists, and it's easy to falter in the face of negativity, because that's all these people tend to offer. But oh, it gets worse than that, because now you have other authors who will then double down on this, right? Eric Lawson, the fucking writer of Savage Dragon. Savage Dragon Arthur tries to come up and says this. The attempt was immediately backpedaled and ended up making no coherent point whatsoever. Namely, that it's saying if you are offended, namely if you're saying that first, if you're offended by that and or say not all men and you're part of the problem. Second, most fave comic artists are men. They just draw women like women. You know, women. This incendiary post was made to antagonize and say people like J. Scott Campbell who draw fantastical women. It's important. And the key point here to understand is that Eric Lawson is not agreeing with it. He's pointing out a point, right? That point being, there is no accountability whatsoever. The point being that, in their point, men shouldn't be allowed to draw women unless they're men whose work they like, which is unacceptable. Because that's you saying that if I draw women a particular way, that makes it acceptable if you will then turn around and attack someone like Troy Vader, or Your Nerd Wonder, or Rainbow Squid Ink, or anyone else like that. And same thing again, if I draw men in a style you like, that makes all my other art okay, while you harass people who do the exact same thing. That's hypocritical. That's ridiculous. It's dumb. But if a whole bunch of people like your post, that makes it okay. And as we clearly see here, as it ratchets it up against, we see very clearly that this is how that goes down. People like this. Yeah, I draw an underage woman in a gross, disgusting, sexualized way, but it's okay because it's just art. Why are you bullying me? So it's okay for muscular men to be muscular and no women to have nut boobs? You guys are just jealous of them. Things that nobody fucking said, but these people are going to assume. Other users like them pile on just like this. Literally, your entire demographic includes children, and you draw them like your target audience is 30-year-old virgins who all given up seeing a woman in real life. Other examples. And this one is a very special one. This individual has a personal fucking vendetta against J. Scott Campbell. And I just want to document this salt. This sounds like women's out there. Feminists have such women. I can't even drive down to that sex scene anymore without the one who cares that comics are made to feel better about themselves. I just want to draw sexy segregated teens. This guy has several posts in this backlog. Just honestly not having the awareness to understand that he is exactly what J. Scott Campbell and Eric J. Lawson were trying to describe. This is the very fucking person they were describing. The sense of mind, it doesn't exist. It doesn't fucking exist. And the fact that he doubles down by then saying he just knows how to make their boobs bigger and put them in anatomically impossible positions and with the "you can masturbate for me" expression. I don't know, J. Scott Campbell. Maybe stop hearing your incel minions and improve your art. Comic book artist. Working for years. Suddenly he's a problem because you don't like him. Interesting. This behavior then continues because it gets worse, where now you have people who are going to use this argument. Namely that it's wrong if you have characters that people could possibly see as sexualized. But when it's male characters, oh, it's delicious. Yummy! Because horny on main is okay. And then, this fun part. The muscle-bound male characters are not intended to be sexualized, and they're targeted towards men and their desire to be strong. It's all a male power fantasy, everybody! It's a male power fantasy! It's okay! It's okay to do it! Not at all like I can't find ways to sexualize characters. Cause clearly. Right? Here's a perfect case. A meme. This being a meme of David, you know the one, or James Charles, looking all cheeked up. One could say he sexualized himself, even though he was countering someone who was trying to take his nudes. Let's use an even better example of Nightwing. Let's use another perfect case example of this spread made of Nightwing, where dead front and center with all the versions and examples of Dick Grayson and any other character who has held the mantle of Nightwing. Here we have a beautiful edition of Nightwing, looking all cheeked up in both of his buns. Clearly, the male fantasy here is that men want to be sexualized. Clearly, yes, one could make that argument, couldn't they? But clearly, the point is that men are sexualized then. Men are inherently sexualized. And it's fine. Because trying to claim that women are sexualized but men are not is ridiculous. Men can be sexualized just as much as women can be sexualized, just as an ugly man could be sexualized, or an ugly woman could be sexualized, or a pretty woman, or any man or woman in between. It doesn't make sense for you to try to make an argument that it somehow doesn't exist like this, because that is you grasping at straws. Straws that don't fucking exist. Because you're trying to come up with a lie to excuse your doublethink. You're trying to win an ideological argument that nobody made, other than yourselves. This, of course, brings me to the point where we need to talk about this double standard, right? There are many ways you could probably describe it, but the way that I choose to describe this is I describe it as the sunstone exception, or as I like to also call it, the Fujo shit moral mousetrap. If men can be sexualized just as easy as women can be sexualized, and you're like Galahad and you have lost your fucking mind and you have decided to claim that it's okay to sexualize the characters as long as they draw them correctly, what supposedly is the correct kind of drawing? Who is the correct kind of artist? Who is the one who you can say is justified for doing so? And here we have a case example where they try to pick and choose. And this is one of those cases of picking and choosing. If you don't know about Cedric, and if you don't know about his wife Linda, he is the one who is currently drawing and illustrating the DC Black Label edition of Harleen. It's a Harley Quinn comic. But his notable art style, which he uses in projects like Sunstone, is notable here. Where people make an out-of-the-way example of trying to say, I am very confident and I have it on good authority that whoever is doing this Harley Quinn comic has drawn a lot of porn. And see, this is not intended to be as a case example. As I said when this was reported on the 25th of 2019, so 2 days before my birthday, this is a case where they're not saying that it is bad that Cedric has drawn porn. No, it's good that he drew it. Because look at how he draws Harley Quinn. Look at how horny on main she looks, everyone. Look at how delicious she looks. Look at her. Look at her. Look at her small bean. Look at how it looks like at any moment Joker's just gonna pull out his dick. Come on, guys. Come on. Come on. Come on! What are you, anti-porn freaks? This double standard is ridiculous. Because if it's supposed to be good that he's done porn, that makes it acceptable and fine, then that means any person who's ever drawn anything that you could consider to be sexual is blanket acceptance. Because if it's okay, then it's fine. What's the problem? The problem is that you decided that they have the wrong morals. It's moralistically wrong to like their art if you like J. Scott Campbell, because he's a dude, bro. He's drawing for the chuds. The incels like his art. Therefore, it is wrong, and they have to be denied the right. But if you're someone who likes Sunstone, oh, well, you're not a shitty person. You're not a dude, bro. You're not a chud. You're one of the good ones. Good ones. Because the logic goes, and I said this to Mr. Marvel when I discussed it with him, if they're stylized in a style, it becomes a case of, where are her organs? If they look underage, she's literally a fucking child. If they're above average, real women don't look like that. Even though people do look like that. And if it's male that draw it, and if it's men that like it, ugh, you're an incel. If women like it, you have internalized misogyny. If they're male, but they also have an attractive girlfriend, like what we saw with Ren, you're ugly, and so is she. You two deserve each other. The standards never stop shifting. The goalposts never stop moving. And I mock this completely in hand for what it is. Because you see, this is hypocrisy, and it's ironic hypocrisy. Because it's an inherent contradiction, ladies and gentlemen. The same inherent contradiction that would bring a person to sit here and say Fujoshi art is acceptable and wrong and bad and cool and good, while at the same time not understanding that it's inherent there, are the exact same people that are doing this circle of diversity, where they demand that you need to include them in a space. But when you include them in that space, that they also need it to be demanded to be changed so that they can change it to their tastes of liking and banning things that offend them. But when you offend them, they then say that you need to be kicked out of the space that we created because you offended them. And when you protest their constant hatred, they say, lol, if you don't like it, why don't you just make your own space? And so you do. And then they start complaining that your space is not diverse enough because it needs to be diverse and inclusive. Beginning the cycle over and over again. Where we get to the point where you have the Fujoshi moral mousetrap as fully displayed. A person who will say that you don't even browse Tumblr. Music is triggering them. That nobody can tell that you don't actually need glasses because you're wearing hollow frames. Where people, where it's current year and you don't have dimple piercings. Where you're healthy at every size. Where cis men should stop stare raping you. Where everybody should fear the fupa. Where you store their tears, that it's okay, and that you should be able to have handsome men, and you should be able to have handsome women that should have sex with you without having to apologize because they're obsessing over you. That the action of having these things that you want makes you somehow guilty of something that you're not guilty of. And this is clear when you actually start breaking it down, right? Because when you start trying to critique art and trying to give explanations about how art is problematic, you now have to explain exactly where that problematic existence comes from. When you say things that you have to make exemplifications of art, where the art has to be analyzed because of all these takes, made by a person who decided to try to make art fixes of comic books, the same way they tried to make it about anime, they go through here. And almost every single one of these assertions, they're made to be something they base off of ideas they got from somewhere else. Like quoting The Incredibles, which was itself a take on superhero tropes. Claiming that because Edna Mode said that you shouldn't have capes, that means no capes. That's not how that works. Same thing here, where they try to compare characters like Miss Marvel, and Wonder Woman, and Power Girl, where they try to make these takes in examples by saying it's justified because therefore I say them, therefore I think, therefore I am. When you really think about it, the way that they draw these characters, the way that they have these characters depicted, it's the same idea as you begin seeing in Western Hollywood, and how Hollywood has gone woke with this idea, where they project this onto the design of their characters. Now, this point here becomes paralleled when you start thinking about it, because characters, they can't be sexualized, right? They can't be sexualized because if you sexualize them, that makes them wrong and horny and bad. So the right way to sexualize characters is to take away anything that could be inherently seen as feminine about them and to assert them as basically a female man. It's a man with breasts rather than it being a woman with a body. You have to take away the long hair because long hair, women they can have any kind of hairstyle. Okay, well, you can't have them showing skin, so put them in full body cat suits. Alright, that's cool. Well, you can't have them with giant fucking breasts. How dare you? Hoving heaping goo-has. That makes them look wrong, as we've already saw and read earlier. Can't have them look like this. It's okay if they look like this, when it's the right kind of person, but you can't have them look like this. They need to look like this. They need to look like this. It starts to blend together. And the entire idea is that when you start projecting these ideas, you get people like Jerry Conway, the person who's responsible and behind the production of Birds of Prey, and the fantabulous emancipation of one Harley Quinn, which has now been changed to Harley Quinn Birds of Prey to exemplify that this very well and very clearly was a Harley Quinn movie that just featured other characters, which, by the way, were tokenized as all get out, saying loudly, proudly, and I quote, "I'm so disappointed by the Birds of Prey box office and what it says about the male audience for superhero films." An audience that your campaign went on to say you didn't need the attention of. Interesting. Here's my controversial take. Don't hate me. The movie didn't pull teenage boys because Margot Robbie didn't want Harley Quinn to be sexualized as she is in Suicide Squad. This being the same man who does not understand that in project works like Batman and Harley Quinn, you got things like this. The superhero bar where you have the waitresses dressed up as comic book characters in accurate, at the time, because this was like 2017 or so, 2016 I want to say, probably 2018 if I'm being honest, but current, accurate comic book designs for the characters. You got examples for Starfire, examples for Tigress, other examples for other beauties. You've got, I think this right here might be a Green Lantern one, but I can't see because it's turned around. It's been a while since I watched the film. Here you have one for a body example for Power Girl, and then you got one for Batgirl, and then another one for Supergirl. And of course, this is from the film, so in frame, you can see the cheeked up example of Nightwing. By the way, in this same film, Harley Quinn has sex with Nightwing against his wishes while he's tied up in bed. Not a single person batted an eye about that, by the way, because this was a direct-to-DVD feature. So it was made for the audience it was made for. Much like how in Toku, when you have a direct-to-movie hyper battle video that was made that can be more bloody than the TV final version of a show, this is exactly that. Ain't nobody give a shit. We been new. We been seen they got bodies. Nobody cared, because we already knew they could be sexualized. We do it to the men, we do it to the women. Ain't nobody batting a fucking eye. The people who actually consume this content, they already were fine with it. But Jerry Conway says, and I quote, "It's horribly shallow, but there we are. I bet much of Harley's appeal for young men in Suicide Squad was the hypersexualization of her body in a midriff shirt and short shorts that emphasized her buttocks and her legs. To her credit, Robbie wanted to attack that, and the result was a complete desexualization of Harley and Birds, so much that we see her in baggy overalls or baggy pajamas, and throughout, her fellow Birds are also desexualized. In the abstract and also politically, this is good. But superheroes, they unfortunately depend on a large market of their audience on young men, and without special powers or a truly mind-bending set of special effects that would draw young men to see Birds of Prey if there was no, TNA. It's crass, it's horrible, it's shallow, except it's fucking normal and regularly fucking happens." Later on in this diatribe, he tries to backped this by saying there wasn't enough of a female audience to compensate for taking this out, that they put there in bagging clothing, therefore you could not sexualize them. This is admitting that you want to understand the effect of sex appeal on the work. You do want sex appeal. Sex does indeed sell. You're making a film for a massive audience. So when you try to woke scold an audience that should see your product, and then you tell them, oh, there's nothing in here for you, it's only for diverse boys and girls. What you're actually saying is, we know that we need to project to you, but we're actually going to tell you that you should watch our film because we're making good art. And if you don't support it, that makes you problematic. Who wants to be woke scolded about to who they want to go to see films for? Nobody. Nobody wants that. Not a single person wants to ascertain a single reason why they should support you when you're going to tell them out of pocket and out of hand that they are already problematic because they're not supporting your views. That's not how that works. That's not where that goes. And of course, for this recording, it isn't just this. Because I would be remiss if I didn't bring this up. This idea is also projected about people who do this about other things. Right? Case example from October. A person who's complaining and bitching and whining and moaning at the time when Lauren was still active on one of the many threads that she would make about the things people would get upset about. A scene, by the way, which would become popular because of Christina Forechi Tasty making a video mocking people who choose to think like this, telling them blatantly that they are the fucking problem, on how they harass not just the Easterns, but also the Westerns. They would go on to say that the creator of the manga of High School of the Dead was problematic, and that the manga is not going forward because they prefer to write hentai. Not understanding that the reason that the work was left unfinished for High School of the Dead was because of Daisuke, the creator of it, dying. Now, there's a bit of a difference of a problem, because the animator and the illustrator for High School of the Dead and the same person who wrote High School of the Dead are not one and the same. They just have the same first name, which makes this a case of double racism, which they go on to say that they do it because they prefer to write hentai because supposedly this makes them problematic, but also not recognizing that the person that they're trying to describe is a person who's not living anymore because of a tragic death. And I would also be remiss if I didn't bring up other case examples of this, because Hirokoshi can't catch a fucking break. Hirokoshi, being the author and the writer of My Hero Academia, constantly getting waylaid and backlashed. First, because he tried to bring to attention a name which is used to refer to the case that the Japanese Imperial Army was involved with experiment crimes on using people as test subjects. One of the characters' names being used for a villain. People throwing a fucking waylay about that. Now, them getting outraged that characters have the same birthdays as World War II leaders. And our best case example of the same shit they throw tantrums about all the time, this fucking brainlet getting upset because, and I quote, "Hey, I know Makuro hot, but are we not gonna talk about the time Hirokoshi added this thing there? You know, the horny line, a camel toe. I'm losing my mind. Can't we just respect women? Can't we just give women just one little respect? Like I'm like literally on the fence of tagging this is not safe for work, but this is released in the chapter, and like I know you guys are all busy going support Hirokoshi and shit, but he's too busy drawing women like this. I can't see it. I genuinely hate this guy because he draws them like this. I genuinely hate this person because he drew women. And if you thought that it was just this, no. This shit goes beyond. It transcends. Melody Mac, host for GameSpot TV, or GameSpot, or GameStop TV. She is a lover of Lara Croft. She is a very big Tomb Raider person. Cosplays it, talks about it, loves it. When she tried to talk about Lara Croft here on this post back in June 2019. This was the same post which Anita Sarkeesian would go on to project as being wrong. Because, of course, Anita Sarkeesian has to take pot shots at other women because, doesn't have an argument unless she's beating and breaking them down. But here, in this thread, because I documented this, if I can find it. Where is it? Here we go. In my archive thread of the eternal grievances of Anita Sarkeesian and Jonathan McIntosh, two people who constantly play this game of saying how sexualization is wrong and bad, a woman who made her career off of it, by the way. She would go on to tell Melanie Mack to her face that her argument is deeply fucking flawed because she personally disagrees with it. On top of other things, which you will read about if you read this thread. Melanie is one of the many people who's willing to say, you know what, I like Tomb Raider, and it's not problematic to do so. So, find it beyond us that this fucking individual, Eric Weil, this happening at around about this exact same time that Target Tory happened, this individual comes at Melanie by telling Melanie that they need to see the facts on the numbers, that Tomb Raider had a 40% female player base, which is extremely monumental. He doubles down by saying, this person's trolling on the statement, and that the industry needs to mature instead of playing to these ideas and opinions and individuals. And what Eric Weil does here, on top of blocking Melanie when she calls him out for how wrong he was, he doubles down. Called out by one of my followers. Spectre on my stream, but Chris on Twitter calls out the fact that he tags GameStop after Melanie calls him out about how wrong he is. He tags her job to try to woke scold her and say that she is wrongly representing the company. He reports her to the police. He tries to get her fired, and because it didn't work, he tries to press a case against her. Because supposedly he's been harassed by her. Didn't happen, by the way. But supposedly he harassed her, and that he's been harassed by her. Therefore, he has the right to do this. This is where not having an argument about art gets you. And this is what we've been dealing with throughout the entirety of this time. And there's plenty of people like this who double down this shit. Because at the end of the day, you got people who are going to watch this and say, oh my god, all of that huff and puff, but no smoke and fire. You're still pedophiles. You're still projecting pedo art. Well, boy, don't I got news for you, baby. Because, no, we're not. Because this is how this argument goes. The IWF, the Internet Watch Foundation, who commit themselves to reporting and following up, along with Ashton Kutcher's Thorn Group, they hunt for pedophiles on the platform all the time. They look for it wherever they can. But here, the IWF have to report that their analysts have assessed more reports than ever, but only half of them actually contained image that was actionary. And that false reports waste charity resources and can distress the analysts. This is what happens when you push the idea that drawings are child porn. You wasted people's time, you wasted people's money, and you persecuted them for no other reason than your moral woke scolding. And then here, anti-Twitter lollicons, helping predators get away with child abuse, trying to act morally superior, trying to use all of the likes and the retweets as pats on the back. Perfect case examples of this being what I witnessed when I was covering the shit going on with the porn star that you saw I interacted with. People like CS Pharmacy trying to back up her argument when she got called out and proven wrong. Porn star or not, she's fucking right, you weirdos. Look at the retweets and the likes. They use this as an argument. This is supposedly them saying, oh, look at all the people who agree with us. You're wrong, because I have an entire mob of people who we bought our tweets from. Because we say we have all these people who we bought tweets from. That means we're right. Going so much forward that Xeon chooses to claim this, doing the exact same tactic. Especially considering that this is them trying to defend Tomato Magica, someone who literally, non-stop, has never-ending takes about being fucking toxic. Here, the one that's being seen, being the famous one that went around about at this exact same time, all the time. Namely, them A-logging and complaining and crying and whining about One Piece, and about One Piece characters looking overly drawn, overly sexualized, when that's just the art style, because there are characters that are literally several feet tall, that are exacerbated to be bigger and larger than life, because that's just the style of One Piece. They try to make the defense, saying the girl makes valid criticism. It's not. It's not valid. None of what Tomato Magica has done or has said has been valid. They just A-log. But they claim she makes valid criticism. Fragile men and women who disagree with you, are dogpiling them. The girl blocks out the bullshit. And actually what they did was that they locked their account because they couldn't take the fact that too many people were ratioing them on their tweets and posts while trying to claim that they were victims. In Xenon, of course, they also bought followers and they bought views to be able to promote this as being true, and people being upset and saying, it blew up on its own, weird, I guess it means you have to go make a SoundCloud to promote now. I guess angry anime Twitter shared it around enough to clown on me that it started reaching actual human beings. Actual human beings. Inferring that any person who disagrees with them are not human beings. This crosses over with something else that I have, but it's not relevant right now, particularly to this, but I do mention it because this is the exact same thing that I believe the founder and head of Evil Hat Productions, the woke scolding company that's trying to take advantage of Lovecraft lore so that they can make a cash grab on his IP. They did the exact same thing. I made a comment to him that I repeated, which completely repeats what I said to him and his employees, which is, stop woke scolding customers. Trying to threaten them and insult them because you think that they are below you does not make them want to buy the product. He goes on to tell me that I was not being an actual human being. Same case basis. Same idea. This concept, and this argument. Because this, in October, this being something made by Smug on her account, again, not excusing what she did, but a point that she had here, that it's really odd that no one seems to be using the argument that it's toxic criticism or that it's harassment when an anime artist is minding their own business, drawing their art to being lambasted. That it only seems to apply, like here, with Xenon's situation, where they use this as a justification for how and why they're justified with what they choose to do. That because they're justified and right, it means it's okay for them to do that. Because I personally, I don't understand. Where's the difference? Right? Because we have to understand this. When Xeon's is protecting Tomato Magica's opinions by saying, oh, she's making valid criticism. If she was making valid criticism, why is everyone ratioing her? Is it just that it's toxic men? Or maybe it's because she was wrong, and her take was wrong, and she was rightfully called out that her take was wrong. Why is it that it's toxic criticism and that it's harassment when they are harassing people and A-logging about entire groups? But why is it okay when it's you? It doesn't make sense. And of course, this is a tactic which is being used basically to give a blanket victimhood veil. And the way that it goes is it goes like this. The plan is to make art seem like it's a crime, so that people get arrested, and then fear runs through an art community, forcing everyone, like we've already seen, to walk a line or get arrested, having their lives robbed from them over lines on paper. It's a manipulation tactic, and it's a cowardly one at that. They can only be able to attack fiction because they know damn well that they do not have anything about real-world problems the way that they claim that they do. So they manipulate the meaning of a hero to be reporting art that makes people feel uncomfortable instead of reporting actual crimes. This is what Shiro was doing. This is what Tomato Magica was doing. This is what Xenon was doing. This is what CVS Pharmacy was doing. This is what all of these people, including people like Galahad, including people like the people who harassed me, the people who harassed Ren Toesucker, the people who harassed Evil Art, the people who harassed Blue Breed, the people who harassed Shad, the people who harass artists in general, the people who harass me in general, the people who harass people like Archon, or people like Kung Fu, or people like Kung Fu Man, or other people like Mord Knight, or artists like that. The same people who sit here on a daily basis calling us these things are the same people making these arguments and doing this behavior. And they would rather attack the artists because they don't want to actually attack disenfranchised people. Because to do so would be justifying specific dude bro behavior. Because they're not underneath the Fujoro Marshall mousetrap. They're not given that out. Because they're not as moral as they think they are. It's justified and is right and is good to do so to them. But I got news for you. You're not helping. You're hurting. And how do I know that they're not helping and they're hurting? Well, on top of, the articles themselves coming out about it. It's because myself and other mutuals like me have been able to catch pedophiles on the platform. Because they have a lot to gain from accusing artists of pedophilia. It disguises their actions. It hides them from others by showing, see, I couldn't be a pedo, I'm fighting against them. And it lessens what it means to be a pedophile. Where you can go from a pedophile means you're making CSM material and you're making cheese pizza to you're a pedophile because you draw titty. And a double, triple newsflash, there are pedophiles still operating on Twitter. They are still using it to share child porn. They're still here. This was a report that was followed up on by Anna Sliotz and Ian Miles Chong, IMC. They document very clearly, in unscrutable, non-mistakable terms, that you have done nothing but make it easier for them to get away with doing what they're doing. They're still using the platform, and they're still issuing out megalinks, exactly like the megalink folders that myself and Scribe Undead, Pose Law, were covering on the platform. They're using these things. They're using these links to be able to get them the ability to pay money into cash apps for pennies on the dollar to elicit these empty materials. All this information, all of this shit, easily certifiable. I've had people call back on me for this through my connections, trying to find and stop this. And we can't stop it because, as we've already documented, Twitter will not help. Twitter is more concerned with being terrified of the mob when they sicked them on me and allowed them to try to get away with it, only for them to realize, oh, we made a mistake, and to fix it. This is the absolute state of art on Twitter. This is the absolute state of discussion. This is the absolute state of defending yourself from these people. You can't. There's no possible way that it makes any sense unless you have a big enough platform. Unless there are enough people who are aware of what's going on. Until there are enough people who, probably if they've watched this through this entire content, that are now fully cognizantly aware that it is not happening the way they were told it was happening. It is only people who have the time and the precedent and the ability to sit down and document it like I have. Full-on logs, archives, hit-by-hit posts, displaying the actual shit we're dealing with. It is only after witnessing this that you're able to come to the conclusion that, oh, the reason that people are constantly upset about art and the reason people, like myself even, could be as passionate as we are is because we're dealing with people who are trying to win ideological arguments so they can cape for people who are actively making the platform worse. This is as best as I can. This is everything I have that I can be able to use to cite and to prove and to make it clear what it is I have against these folks. I don't know any other way I can explain this. I don't know how much more succinct I can make it. Because if we're just gonna act like this is okay and acceptable, if we're just gonna pretend that this is okay, if we're just gonna keep doing this, there can't be any art on Twitter. We can't enjoy art. We can't discuss art. We can't make art. We can't enjoy it. We can't discuss it. We can't be able to call out when people wrongly or rightfully have takes about it. We can't do anything because people are just gonna hide behind excuses. Oh, they're attacking us because we're transphobic. They're attacking us. They're attacking us because they're the misogynistic. They're attacking us because they have internalized misogyny. They're attacking us because they're actually pedophiles. Reporting posts that aren't pedophilic, claiming and harassing people, and trying to dog them until they bend a knee to the goddamn outrage mob. Fucking shame on you. This is the reason the shit doesn't stop. This is you. Y'all, the ones we're referring to. The Shinros, the Tomato Magicas, the Mallory Uchias, the suicide night, not the suicide nightmare, but the Manic Pixie Nightmare Girls, the people who will fake tweet posts and will constantly harass and report people who did nothing at all wrong, the people who are fixing art, the people who constantly harass the artists, the people who try to go to the artists' Patreons and their Pivxes and their DeviantArts and their gurus and their crowdfunding resources like Ko-fi and Subscribestar to try to take them down. This is you. This is your fault. You're part of the problem. All you've done is make the problem worse. And I just want you to leave people like me alone. I want you to leave the artists alone. I want you to leave people alone. I want you to recognize that you're wrong because you don't have arguments for defending this. You can't. There's no cognizant way that you could. Because your argument doesn't exist. Time and time again, as I've demonstrated here, every single time this shit happens, it didn't happen the way you said that it did. The argument isn't what you made it was. And we can see the evidence that supports that clearly it's not us that's wrong. There are some of us who have made mistakes, and they've changed. Marvel is probably one of the best case examples, myself included, because I used to be a lot more antagonistic than I am now. But it's not people like me who are at fault. It's those like you who will not change. It's until you choose to come to the table, sit down and say, you know what, we fucked up. We went about this the wrong way. We very clearly don't know what it is we're talking about. And instead of listening to you, we're just going to keep making takes like this. Until you're willing to accept that you are the ones at fault, it will never stop. This cycle of violence, this violence that you inflict on others, by trying to use people like Twitter, trying to use the report functions, trying to use harassment mobs, trying to use K-pop stan cammers, to harass people like Ren, to harass people like Ansel, to harass people like artists in general, and try to push back against this notion that it can't be you. Until you're willing to sit down and say that it is your fault that we got here, this will never stop. We're not trying to stop you from enjoying art. We just want you to have a fucking brain and just take responsibility for your actions. That's all I got to fucking add. I'm gonna go sleep off this alcohol now. Yeah. Good night, everybody. And please, share this around to as many people as you can. I know, it's a giant-ass fucking video. It's really, really big. But I don't know what to do. I honestly don't know what to do at this point. Other than telling you how I see it and how it is. Right? Have a good day. Treat your friends well. And never stop loving the titty. Peace out, y'all.